Rich Mellon from Trapping Inc. TV, Alberta Trapper Extraordinaire, Scuttlebutt podcast. Rich, it's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So I know of you from the show, Trapping Inc. TV, and from your podcast that you and your wife Sandy put on. But I'm sure there's a lot more to the story there. So you want to maybe take us back to the beginning and talk about how you got started in the outdoors?
I was born. The North, it's a life, and especially I'm 61 now, and back in those days, I mean, I was 18, I think, before I first ate beef. You know, everything was moose or elk. We didn't really care much for deer. Wasn't a lot of deer around back then, if you can imagine. And that's just something, you know, deer is something that came in with agriculture, and you were just born into it. I mean, that was some of the first things that you remembered. We started as trappers. I mean, I can remember my grandpa died by the time I was 4, but I can remember trapping pack rats and squirrels and that in the granaries with him when I was little. I remember that. That's about the only memory I have of my grandpa, other than when he was dying, and that all happened by the time I was 4. So, you know, something like that is so ingrained. I get asked so many times, you know, how did I get into trapping? Like it was a choice or something? No, it wasn't a choice. No, I mean, truly,
yeah.
It was the life. It was the life. And I mean, it's like so many other people born into situations where, you know, well, it's like asking somebody, how did they decide to be Irish or whatever? Well, I was born. That was the way it is. And it was just our life. I can remember, you know, by the time we were in elementary school, the city that we live next to now, Grand Prairie, is over 70,000 people. But at the time, it was when my brother and I were trapping rats, it would have been, I don't know, 6,000, 7,000 people. And we would leave elementary school, and, you know, it was, if it hadn't snowed too much, you know, by the time things were freezing, usually we have ice here by the middle of October. Then we'd take our bikes. Otherwise, we'd walk. But it wasn't that far over to. There was a bunch of ponds and that on the edge of the town, and we'd strap on our skates and we'd go check muskrat. We'd have muskrat sets out there. We have. I don't know your area or how it is there, but here the muskrats build push-ups on top of the ice as the ice is forming, and that push-up is just made out of vegetation off the bottom. And what it is he's building a little hut in there that he can go up and get a breath of air in.
Yeah.
Because his food is right there, and he can only swim so far with one breath of air, and then he needs another breath of air, and then he wants to go down, and he wants to bring up food. And amazingly, a muskrat is just about the only animal that can eat underwater. The way its lips are designed, it can actually bite off vegetation and chew it and swallow it without drowning, which it's probably a good thing that I can't do that, or I'd have died of overweight a long time ago. I've been accused of eating fried chicken in the shower at the end of the day. But we would go and, you know, we would take turns. It's amazing, the things, when you look back at it now, we were talented. You know, here's a couple of kids, you know, eight years old. I was probably the eldest, 8, 9 years old. And we would go with a pair of hockey skates on. We would go from one push-up to the next, and one person would pop it open and check for muskrat. If there was muskrat, he handed it to the other guy. The other guy would start skinning it. And by the time that was reset and we were moved on to the next one, the previous muskrat was skinned. And we would take turns, right?
Yeah.
And we were quite the efficient little team.
That sounds like some serious business.
You cannot believe how much you know when we'd start to have vehicles and that. By the time, you know, you're 14, you can have a vehicle, and you know, in our country you were supposed to have, that's a learner's license, and you were supposed to have an adult with you. Well, nobody ever. I mean, we got caught many times, but the fishing game or the officers knew who we were, and like don't be out on the main roads kind of thing. But we would drive all over the place, and we'd have pollution everywhere, and you stop on a pair of skates on a Saturday, and you might go, 10 miles cross country and everything else wearing a pair of skates, right? They were never very sharp.
So you had quite a bit of water around that area.
Yeah, there's a lot of potholes here. We're just about the northern edge of the prairie pothole region. Like, actually, if you get down around Edmonton and Edmonton to Red Deer, there, that's the major prairie pothole that raises the vast majority of ducks that fly on the flyways, and that's where the vast majority of the muskrats come from in Alberta. Like, I know people that will go trap muskrats for 2 weeks, and they'll end up with 5,000-6,000 muskrats.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's not like the what's it called in Wisconsin, the dells in Wisconsin, where they might get 10,000 in the same amount of time, because they actually lease from the state, I believe it is. They lease by the acre or whatever. I met some people at the NTA a couple of years ago in Escanaba, Michigan, and they were fascinating to talk to. One fella who was, I believe his name was Herman. He was high up in North American fur auctions. He was I believe it was the New Jersey swamps. He did muskrats there, and they
had a lot of rats there. I know they've got nutria there now that are raising hell with the rats, but that is great rat country.
What on earth is a nutria?
Well, we don't have them here in Maine, so I can't. I don't have a lot of experience with them, but they're, my understanding, is a very oversized muskrat that were introduced back in the 1940s as part of the fur farming industry, and they have kind of gone wild and exploded in places like Louisiana and the Northwest, and in places in New Jersey as well.
Where did they come from?
You know what? I don't know, but while you're talking, I'm going to look it up. Isn't it great to have?
I hear about them when I.
Technology is awesome. They're native to South America.
Okay. And so they were a valuable fur source at one point?
Yeah, back 30s and 40s when there was a good fur market. I think you could sell just about anything at the time, and people saw how they were a larger version of the muskrat and thought it would be a good idea to bring them in.
Oh, okay. It's funny how things like that happen a lot, and when you have animal movements or when they start moving into new areas. Like I have a friend who lives in southern Ontario, so he's probably actually south of you, and
yeah.
They're starting to have possums show up,
mm-hmm.
and believe it or not, there are biologists within the government that are looking to protect the biologists, even though it's an invasive species. And they're there because they're saying it's climate change causing them or whatever. And just across the border, the possum is the biggest pest ever. That's how silly people are, right?
Yes. Yeah. They are just starting to show up about 5-6 hours drive south of me, of where I am. So it's and gray fox as well. We never had gray fox in the state for a long time, and they've started to move north. So. Yeah, definitely some changes.
I would love to catch a gray fox. They look so pretty. I've never. We on our big trap line, we have very few fox. We live in a country that's tough for fox. Yet, if you go north of us, even further north, all through the territories, Alaska, and that, there's lots of red fox. Mm-hmm. Just our particular area. I think we have still too much snow. We get too much snow for the fox, but. Getting back to how it all started, it was just part of life. We grew up, we hunted, we fished, we trapped. If you looked up Jack Pine Savage in the dictionary, there's a picture of my brother and I together. And we enjoyed it. We enjoyed the ride. We got in on that on the big boom in the early 80s when lynx were running over $1,000 a hide. I had one that at that time we were sending our fur to the Thunder Bay fur market, which I think ended up being bought out by what's now Fur Harvesters. It was one of the many buys that ended up, forming Fur Harvesters. But I got like $1,300 for this one lynx, and that was back before there were quota, and that was back before, like, wherever you trapped, you caught whatever you caught, right?
Okay.
Life has changed now, where we, only if you have a registered fur area do you have any of the quota animals, and they're the only ones that the quota is a maximum that you can take. So we don't have any minimums. Like some places, like Ontario has.
Yeah, they have beaver.
If you have a trap line, yeah, they have a minimum. You have to get 75% of your quota every year in order to keep your trap line. It's literally, every province has its own laws, just like every state has its own laws. But most of Canada is broke up into registered fur trap lines, and what that means is that all of the public land, here we call it crown land, you would call it public land. All of the public land is divided up into trap lines, and in Alberta that happened in 1925.
Okay.
They divided everything up. The average size of a registered fur trap line in Alberta is 2 townships. And are you familiar with townships?
Well, township here is 6 miles by 6 miles.
Yes, exactly. So that's the average size is 2. There are some, as you go further north, they thought it was less valuable place for trapping that, but as you go farther north, some of them are 30 townships the size.
Wow.
And that's the most wealthy fur area in the world, let me tell you.
Now, can one person own more than one registered trap line?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, you can. There is it's kind of a straw man thing that's going on, where they say that people are buying trap lines. Who buy and sell a trap line? You buy and sell the assets, and you have the right, the exclusive right to that trap line, that area to trap. Like I have my trap line is 4 townships.
Yep.
So it's 12 miles by 12 miles, or 144 square miles of trapping, and I have the only right to trap there. And what I bought when I bought it is there was 3 cabins on it. There was an old snowmobile and that kind of stuff. So I ended up paying for that.
Yeah.
And I have to do a fur report every year that shows that I'm trapping, because people have, especially when you get over towards the mountains, in Alberta we have the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains, and the Rockies divide us from BC. And those eastern slope of the mountains is very, very popular for hunting and, like bighorn sheep and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of people that have bought trap lines over there, and basically they build a nice big cabin on
a hunting cabin, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not legal. That's not legal. That was not the whole idea behind trapping the trap lines or anything else. But you have 4 doctors to go together, and they bought a trap line for $600,000.
Wow.
Like that can never ever be paid for.
Right.
By the fur. But when you take a zero off of there and go to $60,000, which is what I paid for my trap line, my current trap line, and I bought that. This would be my 6th year on it now. I've paid for it already with fur.
Wow.
And yeah. And so I mean, there has to be some realism, but I'm not advocating the government get more involved in our lives.
Well, it's interesting that you talking about those trap lines, and the guys that I talk with in Alaska have a similar system where you can buy a trap line from someone essentially by buying the gear in their agreement not to trap there in the cabins, but it's not controlled by the government. You have any thoughts? Like, is one system better than the other?
Well, my claim is backed by law, by basically a deed.
Yeah. And
so I think that's better, because as the world gets more crowded, those old conventions, those old handshake conventions aren't going to hold up. Today's people don't have the same respect, for historic principles that we've always had, and I see it all the time. Like, I mean, we, of course, with the TV show, we air on YouTube and we air on Amazon Prime and all that kind of stuff. we have an incredible reach, and so people from all over the world contact us, and but mostly fellows from the U.S. And that is the number one concern, is that people, you know, intruding on their area or on their trap line. You know, like people talk about how you might have 6 different people sat underneath a bridge for me, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I understand the difficulty of the whole idea that, you know, that I have 144 square miles that I have exclusively. I can sign as many juniors as I want, as long as I'm producing fur, and I do produce a lot of fur. As long as I'm producing fur, I'm doing what I'm honoring how the system was set up. You know, it's just like, you know, the Second Amendment with you folks and that. I mean, it had a principle about why it was set up, and that was that, you know, no invading force or government could you know, overtake the people, right? The people had the right to defend themselves. And people lose that idea because they lose the idea, say, well, you don't need an automatic weapon to hunt deer. Well, it wasn't about hunting deer.
Yeah.
It was for the people to stand up for their rights. And that was the same principle that was behind setting up registered trap lines, was to make sure that trap lines were being used. Because before that, I mean, the areas around, you know, metropolitan areas where most of the traffic took place. And of course, there was lots of theft. There was lots of wars and fighting in that. You know, somebody needed money, you know, in the hungry 30s, you know, a muskrat was worth $1, you know, and you couldn't work in a factory for $1 a day, but you could go out and catch, you know, maybe 20, 30 muskrats in a day. Mm-hmm. So that was really big money, and it became a, you know, how do we control this? Well, then they had to, by splitting it up, they forced people to actually, you know, either live out on their trap line or move further. And that was why in Alberta we're allowed to build cabins on our trap line. And it's because we're allowed to live. We're allowed to live there the year round.
Okay.
And the whole idea was to utilize the fur, you know, that it was, you know, that it wasn't, you know, being over harvested in one area and not being touched in another, just by simple, you know, logistics of what is easy access, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. The one drawback that I would see personally is I always like to explore different areas, and I'm thinking, well, what if there's nobody trapping in this particular drainage, and I wanted to go check that out and try trapping. And I suppose you could talk to the guy who has the registered line and maybe sign on as you call it a junior?
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? That is happening more and more, because now there's been, we've had a change in government, and there's been a lot more focus on whether or not people are actually using the trap line and what the use is. Like, my son is a junior on the trap line in central Alberta, near the Sound of Rocky Mountain House in the mountains. And the old fellow that owns the trap line is 82 years old. He has a wonderful cabin, built a beautiful log cabin on that. And he likes to go out and cut the grass in the yard in the summertime and watch the moose down in the muskeg below the cabin. That's what he lives for. He's starting to suffer from dementia. That his son is a engineer in the oil patch and has no interest in trapping, but loves to be out of the cabin with his dad. So the only way they can keep it is if somebody is trapping it, and so that's my son.
Okay.
My son is out there trapping, and he does his fur reports every year, and everybody's happy because it's being utilized.
Yeah.
You know, and which was the whole design afterwards. You know, like there are people that, as more and more juniors got signed, and there were people who got, everybody's got their own axe to grind, right? Yeah. And so a lot of people get into this while it's, you know, people are using it for hunting camps and all that, because these people want the hunting camp, or they want the trap line. So then when, you know, they started cracking down and they're on the fur reports, and there had to be, you know, so much fur taken every year, and whether it was by you or a junior didn't matter. Well, then, which is the way it always was. There was never a difference between whether it was the junior or the senior that was catching the fur. Now, all of a sudden, people are complying by having juniors on there. Then, you know, the people are mad, because that wasn't the end they wanted, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the folks are abiding by the law. The fur is being trapped. You know, the land's being managed, and but that's not what they wanted. That, you know, that wasn't their end game. But, you know, in today's world with coyotes and wolves and you know, the issues we've got there, we need trappers more than ever. Like, I notice a lot of my friends in that throughout the states are not really fur trappers as they're animal damage control trappers.
Yes.
And because there is so much conflict between civilization and the wild, and the trappers are that last buffer. We're the last people between. I've said this many times, but in Alberta, on average, we ship between 40 and 45,000 coyotes to the auction every single year. Okay, you can imagine what it would cost the day the trappers don't do that for free anymore.
Yeah, and if the coyote price crashes, then that we might see a little bit of that.
You might. You certainly might. I don't know if it's going to crash or not. I don't think so. I don't know what the heck Canada Goose is doing with this buyback thing. I think that's on the surface used to be such a laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, they're probably. I'm trying to figure out whether they're going to go into people's closets and start clipping the trim off their parkas or what.
Well, I mean, just even go do a search out into Gigi or whatever, whatever reseller you've got around.
That's the Craigslist of Canada.
Okay, Craigslist.
Yeah.
You taken, and how many are the Canada Goose jackets are out there for sale? Wow, seriously.
None here.
No, I know. When they come up here, and that full expedition is a very expensive jacket, and if you find one that comes up for sale at $800 or something, you want to be all over it as long as it's not junk, and it just doesn't happen. It just does not happen. So I don't know where this is coming from. I think, what I think? I think Canada Goose bought themselves 2 years.
Yeah.
They bought themselves 2 years from the Antis, and they're hoping something else changes in between, or they've got another program or something that's going to take the load off. But if coyotes are still popular in 2 years' time, they're going to be buying them.
That's a great point. That wouldn't surprise me a bit if they were under pressure and they needed to buy some time. Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's my thoughts. But
I hope so.
Canada Goose, like we're all like our top end, our heavies out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has the best coyotes in the world, and that they're a small coyote. They're fine furred. Even the males are pretty fine furred, but those females are just like silk. They have the white bellies, and they have the best in the world. We can run them, close compromise, but we're not as good as theirs. But those really high end things don't go to Canada Goose.
Yeah,
they go to Italy, and a lot of people don't realize that. Like Mark Downey, who owns Fur Harvesters in Canada. I've dealt a lot with Mark, and I did a podcast with him after they tried to have an online auction. And he says the high end guys couldn't get here, and he says they do not buy things sight unseen, and it only makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
None of us would buy something high end. I mean, if you're buying something cheap, sure, you can do it online or whatever, but not when it's high end, not when you're looking for something particular. So I understand. Canada Goose is a big volume buyer, and they're kind of like McDonald's. Like they buy the whole cow. So McDonald's not only gets the flank, but it gets the ribeye.
Yeah.
But it all gets ground into burger, right? Anyway, we wandered a long ways away from where we started there.
I want to know, going back to your trap line, I want to know if 144 square miles is enough to keep you busy.
Oh my God. I'm on it every 4 days, and I have a little over 300 kilometers of line. So I don't know, 180 miles, something like that.
That's a good way.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to think about, especially like marten and fisher are big animals for us, as well as lynx and otter and that. And you can have a trap every quarter mile. So you think about that, how often when you square out 144 square miles, how many traps can be set? Like I probably have 400 martin boxes hanging out there all the time because we're in a remote area, and I don't have to worry about people, vandalism or people stealing them. Why steal a plywood box, I don't know, but people have done it.
Yeah.
And I don't, I've got nowhere near one every quarter mile. You know what I mean? Because some areas just don't have the area that, or the habitat that carries them. Like we do have some in the center of the trap line. There's a big area of tamarack muskeg, and it's probably, I don't know, might even be a quarter, maybe as much as a third of the center of that 144 square miles that is tamarack muskeg, and really doesn't hold much. Lynx travel in the wintertime because there are rabbits in there, but as far as fisher and martin and that, they're just travelers that'll go through there, and that's that young of the year dispersing and they'll move through. And so I don't target them because it's really a low percentile area, and you end up catching more squirrels and stuff like that. And I don't need more squirrels in my life.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Did you have to do a lot of trail cutting and moving traps in and stuff when you bought the line?
Oh yes, the fella that I bought it from ended up getting sick, and he ended up getting dementia, and so he hadn't trapped it for probably 8 years. When I went back through and I looked at the fur records and that, all of a sudden, like 8 years before, he no longer had a single quota animal. And a quota animal, like the senior has to take a quota animal in and it gets registered and tagged. So our quota animals are fisher, otter, wolverine, and lynx. And, like my maximum number of fisher for a year is 18. My maximum number of lynx is 22. Otter is 12, and wolverine is 1. So what happened was they were still doing a fur report, which anybody could do for him. When you do the quota, you're signing, it's an affidavit, right? But the fur report's a different deal altogether. So all of a sudden they started catching a whole bunch more beaver and muskrats. And Sy told me that his son was then fudging the records because they no longer were catching any quota animals. But when we took it over, it also showed that. One of the things that people don't understand is that the more you trap an area, the more useful it becomes, the more productive it becomes. When we took it over, all of our animals were old apex predators. So for instance, I was allowed 18 fisher a year, and I was allowed whatever martin I wanted to catch, right? Well, martin is smaller than a fisher, so everything eats a martin.
Yeah.
The first year, by the time I had to quit, and like I still had a month of season left, and I had to pull all of my martin and fisher traps because I was at 20 fisher. Mm-hmm. I was 2 over my quota. You go out one time, you make a check and you have 5, and the next time you go, you have 8. You know what I mean? Right. It's like boom. But at the same time, I had 7 martin. Okay, almost
obvious what was going on there.
Well, yeah, you're a biologist. You know exactly what's going on. The vast majority of that 20, 1 was a female, because the females are smaller, and everything else was like big old males, right? And at the same time that I caught 20 fisher, I caught 7 martin. There was, and they were all in one little tiny corner of the trapland down the southeast. Over the years now, I probably average in that 12 to 18 fisher every year, but now I'm running over 40 martin a year.
Yep.
And the martin has spread out right across the trapland. It's the same thing with lynx. Like my first year, I got 12 lynx, and they were all big lynx, and they were all mostly males. Once again, there was no kittens. Didn't even see tracks of kittens. And after 4 years in that, now my lynx population is higher than ever because the females are having lots and lots of young. I saw a female last year with 9 kittens. And I was sitting at, I think, 17 or 18 lynx at the time, and I could have shot them. I could have shot and filled up my up to 22 if I wanted to, but kittens aren't worth what the adults are worth, and what the heck? I mean, leave them for another year, right?
Yeah.
So, that was the other thing. I was not catching any young of the year, whether it was my martin or my that salmon martin were all big martin, and once again mostly males. I'm not sure I understand that the male to female ratio, because now I'm catching probably 30 to 40% female in all of them, and yet the populations are higher and better, right? The only place where that's still an anomaly is my weasel, my short-tailed weasel, and they have just gone on a tear the last couple of years. I'm averaging 60, 70 weasel a season, and just about every one of them is a male.
Huh. Wow.
I don't know the explanation for that. I've asked biologists that, and they don't have any idea either.
Well, just overall, that's a fascinating concept, and I think it gets overlooked a lot, and maybe it's because it's counterintuitive. Like, well, you trap more animals, you're going to have fewer animals, on the surface, but that whole idea that the trap line becomes more productive or the habitat, the area becomes more productive as it's trapped and animals are harvested. When you really think about it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it is, and like you say, it is counterintuitive because everybody looks at you to begin with. And I mean, I deal with a lot of people who are non-believers and a lot of people who are, very anti-trapping, and I've got pretty good at judging whether it's worth my breath or not. And if I can get them to walk away with just a neutral, like they're okay, it's maybe not bad. I'm not sure it's good, but it's maybe not bad. If I get that neutral, and I think I've had a victory. So I'm not sure, exactly how it works, other than every year, depending on the species and that, only 1 to 10% of the young of the year have to make it to the next year for that species to carry on.
Yeah.
So, when we're talking about walleye, 1%, right? 1% of the eggs will
yeah, in fisheries, I work with this all the time, and you have a hard time, people have a hard time understanding, I equate it to when someone kills a doe, and some people say, well, you just killed 2 because you killed that doe would have had a fawn or 2 fawns the following year, so you could have killed 3 deer by just killing that doe. Well, it doesn't really work that way. Mother Nature has set things up to where the habitat is the constraining factor, and when you talk about fish, fish can have between 300-400 to thousands of eggs, and only 2 of those need to survive to adults to replace and sustain the population.
Yeah, absolutely true, and that was the same situation here. We would have been in the early '80s, and we were running like 150,000 or 180,000 moose tags every year, and that was successful harvest. And so we were over harvesting the moose, and it was wide open. Like, I mean, there was. The season would run from the 1st of September to the end of November, and there was a month-long cow and calf season in the middle. Like, I mean, we couldn't have targeted, done more for herding it. And we were in a boom population at the time, so they went to draw. And it was pretty easy. One of the things they did was they split it to, there was an early season, which was, calling season, which was always fun, and then there was a late season, which was probably more successful. But anyway, they ended up driving the populations up, and they were so proud. This would have been in the early 90s. They were so proud because now we had 30% more moose than we'd ever had on the landscape. And they said, this was a success from the biologists and their limited entry draws and managing for the future. And that year that spring, we had the terrible moose tick population. I think Maine, you know what that is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Well, guess what? The moose ticks killed 30% of the population, so we were right back to the carrying capacity we had before.
and those could have been hunter killed and gone into freezers if you think about it.
Well, that's just it, and that's where I was going with this 1 to 10% thing, is that all we are dealing in is a surplus. That's what we're looking for, is to manage that surplus. I know that nothing ever gets wasted in the wild. But if we can put that fur to use, that's a big advantage, and it's not, the carcass might go back out onto your wolf baits or whatever, that kind of stuff. So the nature does get it. You're just taking the fur out of the equation and putting it to use. So there's, the conservation side of it is something that people don't see. They all think that, trappers are the bloodthirsty criminals, basically, and they're just looking out for money. And that's not the truth. Not the truth at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we are conservationists, and especially here in Canada, we're signatory to AHEDIS. I don't know if you're aware of that. What AHEDIS is?
You'll have to explain it so I can. Is that a humane standard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was in the 80s. They started trying to ban our fur out of Europe and the European Union, and so finally it got serious, and we said, okay, tell us what's humane. We're not going to stop trapping, but tell us what's humane. So they kind of laughed at us, and they set these standards. Well, we met them. And things like a fish or a marten has to be dead or beyond recovery in 2 minutes, 120 seconds. A beaver has to be dead or beyond recovery in 5 minutes, 300 seconds. That's the things like you guys call them Conabear, which is a brand, but the body grip traps. And we have our signatory to that here. So it is the Agreement of International Humane Trapping Standards. And because we signatory to it, allows our fur to go to Europe and all that, and by extension, you guys get to piggyback in on that too, because you send, so many of you send your fur to the auctions in Canada, or now it's just one auction, but so your fur gets included in that what we're doing, and that changed how we trap things.
Yeah.
It changed a lot of how we trap things. Like no longer can marten be caught in a foothold, say or think what you want about me, but I don't want my animal hanging by its foot off a tree, waiting to freeze to death or waiting for me to come along. I like that 120-second thing, the 2 minutes. When my time comes, I'll take the 120 seconds anytime. I got no problem with the traps that I have, and I got no problem with packing extra traps because they're frozen into it or whatever. And I like to be dead there. I don't like, the thought of them waiting for me or death or whatever. So that's just me. I mean, I'm maybe a little soft-hearted. I mean,
well, it certainly varies, but it depends on the person. Some people have different thoughts and ideas on what's humane than others do, for sure.
Well, it's kind of the way you're raised. When we were young and that, there was no such thing as humane. And I mean, we didn't have the same trapping standards and that. It was all the way it was, right? But that's the way we were raised. And it, not to defend anybody, but I remember the first time that that I read about or heard anything about the Ku Klux Klan. And I'm a voracious reader and investigator, and I read into it, and I began to understand that they were born into it. It was their life. It wasn't something they came to later. That was how they're raised, and so I understood exactly how that could have that kind of grip on you, how you could have those beliefs, right? I'm not defending them or anything else. Don't get me wrong. It's a horrendous idea, and no different than any of the the other terrible communists or Nazis or whatever that happened throughout history. But I understood how it happened, and I look back at it now and in my life and between hunting and trapping and that, I mean, I've killed more animals than the Spanish flu, and it has become more and more important as I've got older that everything is very, very quick. When you were younger, if you had a bad shot on an animal and you didn't get to finish it up for a few hours, it didn't bother you. It didn't keep you up at night, but it does now. It does now for whatever reason. I just, I guess it's one of the stages you go through, right?
Yeah, so, you get soft as you get old, don't you?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I blame grandkids for that. I have 7 of the little germ bags, and every time I go visit them, they give me the latest disease. And
So you have done a lot through the show in promoting trapping and in trying to kind of educate people more on trapping. We went from the rich that started out trapping as a kid, and now you've got this big show that's popular throughout Canada and also quite popular here in the U.S. You must have had a time period in between where you figured out how to do all this filming stuff and going around to different places. What'd you do? You were in the hunting industry?
Yeah, in '99 we started the show called Outdoor Quest TV, and I had a partner in it, and my partner had a past history. He'd been producing a fishing show for Cable News Network out of Saskatoon in Saskatchewan, or Regina, or it might have been Regina. Anyway, he had some history on how to make TV, so we got into it. And first, I'm going to say the first 4 or 5 years were half fishing and half hunting. So every show had a fishing component and a hunting component. And we liked it because, well, for one thing, fishing is so easy to make TV of, and fast. You know,
Yep.
like I mean, 2 weeks you could have your 13 episodes in the can. Hunting's a whole nother story, you know. And we started like in '99 and we worked at it, and we went through so many iterations as technology was changing. When we first started, we couldn't afford a camera or couldn't afford a cameraman or an edit suite. You know, back then a used Betacam was $70,000.
Wow.
The Media 100, which was basically a box, you know, and I remember the one that our editor used had 16 megabytes of RAM. You know, like wow, you know. It was an array. There was 4 drives. It was not RAM, pardon me, it's storage. 16 megabytes of storage.
Jeez.
And you know, so we started by hiring a cameraman, and you know, because he had a camera. That's the only reason we were hiring him. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but most cameramen, the qualified cameramen, are not outdoors people.
Yeah.
The shape. They're not the shape of an outdoors person. I can remember we flew this guy with this. We were hunting caribou in the north, and my wife was lining up. There's this, you know, okay. In fairness, there's 1,000 caribou out in front of us, but there's only one 400-inch bull. I said, she's going to shoot the big one. She's going to shoot that 400-incher. And he says, which one's that? You know, you know, like he had no idea. He had no reference to what he was looking at. Yeah. And he went out to make a whole bunch of errors there. Like, you know, so I said, well, you just keep a wide pan here, because back then they didn't have a lot of zooms on those big data cameras and everything. He had a 2-power multiplier on it, so I think he probably had 8-power zoom kind of thing. And so I said, you just sit here and watch us. We're going to crawl down, and you're going to, you know, as long as you keep us in the frame, and you keep us in the bottom of the frame, and where we're looking at, you know, yeah, well, above us, you'll get our animal in the frame, right? So we go down there, we start crawling, and we started at about 400 yards, and we got to about 200, and we were just waiting for him to clear from some cows and that, so there was no chance of a shoot through or anything. And that, all of a sudden, it was like a grenade went off, and these caribou just went everywhere, just running everywhere. I was like, what in God's name just happened, right? And I'm looking around, I look back, and here's Tim, and he had set his tripod on top of the highest bump on the land, and he's putting his camera up on top of it and looking at skylines, right?
Yeah.
And he just terrified everything. And like I was the biggest caribou of the whole trip, and everything else was like, oh my God. Yeah, but that, and you know, and he could never get up a mountain. I mean, he could roll down it. You know, that was the condition he was. So these are the things that you dealt with in the early days. So we had a cameraman, and then we had another guy who was an editor. But basically, I had to stand beside the cameraman and tell him what to shoot, and I had to sit beside the editor and tell him, well, this is what I want to do here. And so then he'd put in transitions, that kind of stuff. So we got on-the-fly training that way, right?
Yeah.
And you said earlier that I was trapper extraordinaire. I'm not trapper extraordinaire. but I'm pretty good at making TV. I'm a very good generalized trapper. You know, I know a lot about different animals now, but I do know people who are specialists in certain animals, which is always interesting to run into. So we did that for, I guess it would have been about, say, 3 years ago now. So in about 17, my partner and I split the sheets on the Outdoor Quest, the hunting show, and we went exclusively into Trapping Inc. We're in our 6th season right now, so we've been up for 3 years, and when I started it, okay, this goes back to, you know, the whole motivation, right?
Yes.
And we had a fella, I don't know, Trapper Gord is a large trap wholesaler or retailer, pardon me, and lure retailer and all that here in Alberta, and pretty well known throughout Canada, and lives across the river from me. And he put an ad up. He took out an ad with us on our hunting show, and we kept getting feedback like, when was the Trapper Gord show going to be on? When was the Trapper episode going to be on? All this kind of stuff, and not just us, but the channel was getting the same feedback too, right?
Okay.
So
we you discovered that there was a demand for that.
Well, yeah. I mean, you kind of got the trappers. How do you explain this? Do you know, like when it was not good to be gay and everybody hid in the closet, that didn't really work, did it? You know, after they stood up for themselves and started to have a parade and that, then, you know, things regulated and got to the normalcy we have today, right?
Yeah.
You know, they had a parade, but trappers, we were still hiding in the closet. We weren't going to have a parade. And when we got to a certain point, we were successful. You know, one of the few independent shows that were successful, that we were actually paying our own way, especially in Canada. But you only have a certain amount of product you can sell. You have 12 commercials, right? Mm-hmm. And it's simple. If you're getting $20,000 a commercial, that's $240,000, and then you got to take your expenses out. You got to split it 2 ways. So it's not a lot of money, right? I tell people that all the time, and I'm sure when they walk away and they say, "Well, he just threw that out so quickly." I don't believe it. It's not true. No, it is true. It's the God honest truth. I mean, and I can tell you what. If you're averaging $20,000 a commercial in Canada, you are at the top of the top. You know what I mean? Yeah. We don't average that. You know, that's as good as it gets.
If anything was super lucrative, it's any business you look at from the outside, it looks really lucrative, but everybody would be doing it if the money came that easy.
Well, exactly. But I think part of it is people look for something that they enjoy doing and then making a living out of it, and you know. The TV makes trapping a lot harder. You know, it's a lot more work.
Yeah.
You know, there's the whole reality of living and traveling and trapping in our winters, which can kill you. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to be over dramatic. I'm not trying to be life below zero or anything else, but you can die if you're stupid. Mm-hmm. You can die if you're just moderately dumb, you know. And sometimes even when you're smart, you know, things can go wrong. The worst situation I ever got into. What's that?
Bad luck.
Yeah.
Can kill you.
The worst situation I ever got into, I was trying to drive my snowmobile up onto a road. And this was back a few years ago. And you got to go up slow, but you got to go up fast enough so you don't get stuck before you hit the plow ridge. Like we have, 10 feet of snow. And where the plow ridge is hard, but the snow in the ditch is soft. So I'm going across this, and I'm kind of come up at an angle so I can look both ways so that I don't jump out in front of an oil field truck, right? Mm-hmm. You know, there's not that many vehicles, but I mean, it does happen. Well, just as I'm looking over my shoulder back in the one direction, the machine breaks through on the ditch side or the downhill side, and it rolls over on me. Well, now I have a 680-pound machine on top of me, and I'm in 6 feet of snow. And I was laughing because it's kind of funny. I mean, I didn't get hurt or anything, but then I can't get it off of me.
Yeah.
I can't get it off of me, you know? Like, it's like, oh, crap, you know? So it took quite a bit of time to get out of there, and that's how easy I could have died at doing 2 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. You know? And so trapping adds. I mean, the film, the TV, and that adds to all that work. It adds a lot, you know, and you need an enormous amount of footage and all. But when we were maxed out and we were looking for another show, then so we thought we maybe had capacity to bring up another show and have 12 more commercials to sell.
So you were going to have Outdoor
And my
Quest
part-
and the trapping show.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
but we hadn't decided at that point. My partner wanted to do a fishing show. Well, the fishing world is probably the worst media to get into because there are so many people doing fishing shows. I mean, it's easy. You need very little in the way of gear or anything else, and there's always interesting fishing everywhere. I mean, don't matter where you are, you got fabulous fishing in Maine that you could do
Yep.
a dozen shows on, right?
Yep.
And so what happens though is that there's also no sponsorship in it. Just about there are like 3 major motor manufacturers and probably less than half a dozen major boat manufacturers. You'd be amazed at how many different brands are made by the same manufacturer.
Okay.
So there's really no sponsorship there. Just about all of the lures and line and rods and reels and all that are either owned by Normark or Berkeley. That kind of stuff. So I know, I was a professional fisherman on the PWT for 6 years, and I was the most successful Canadian ever. And I was on a lot of, well, not a lot, half a dozen U.S. pro staff teams and stuff like that, right? Back in the day when you got paid money for doing that stuff, you weren't just a brand ambassador. So I understood how the game worked, and I didn't really want to get into fishing because I didn't think that there was a business plan there that worked, a business model that we were going to be able to make money at or even break even. And we were getting all this feedback about when was Trapper Gorge Show going to be on and all that kind of stuff. So at that same time, Swamp People was really big.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, you know what? They're out there, they're gut hooking gators, and then they're shooting them in the head. They make us look.
And people loved
that's
it.
Right. I know, but they made us look mainstream.
Yeah.
And, well, no, listen, because I mean, when you show the reality of trapping today, the reality of trapping in my world, it's conservation minded, it's humane. It's none of the things that trapping was, so that was what really promoted me to start. It was the thought that, I could lose money in a fishing show, or I could lose money with a trapping show. But at least with the trapping show, I can spread some truth. And I probably, had I not been so passionate about the trapping, I would probably, if I just treated it as a business, I'd be more successful financially. But I wanted the truth to get out there and to show what was really, really going on. As trappers, we ran and hid for so long. We allowed pure falsehoods and lies to be pushed out on the population. Every time, I mean, it's just, you can see the reaction of somebody's face. They say, well, what's your TV show about? And I say trapping, and you can see immediately they think, oh my God, he's one of those people that skins animals alive.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest falsehood ever fabricated in the history of man, other than, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And, it was the biggest falsehood ever.
But if you're in the closet, then you can't deny it, right?
Exactly. Our response was to hide deeper, to stack the sweatshirts in front of us and that kind of stuff. And the truth of it is, and as a trapper, the animals are dead when you get there, or you kill them right away, because that's that is the only humane thing to do. How you could begin to skin a fox, a fish, or a wolverine, or a wolf alive, I have no idea. Why would I do it?
It would not be a very wise decision.
No, my God. No, just from personal safety. Like, let's not be retarded. Those little animals are vicious. I mean, that's their only response. Teeth and claws is their response to life, right? So they're not going to grow another hide. So, they're going to be dead one way or the other. And it only takes a few seconds to kill them. And the overwhelming factor is the reason that I caught that animal was for the fur, and the only value in that fur is how good I can put it up. I can't make it something that nature didn't already make it, but I can sure make it worth a lot less. So we allowed all of this BS to go on, that animals were being skinned alive. Like, I mean, it was ridiculous. And that was one of the major things that it just, one day I just had enough, you know? And I thought, you know, I have a lot of old friends, and a lot of them are have now passed on since I started the TV show, or they can no longer trap and all that kind of stuff. And they're the kind-heartedest, most gentle person that people you've ever seen. Their understanding of animals and the wild is epic. And, you know, but they're very cut and dried. You know, it was like when you raise pigs for food, you know, you might name them or whatever, but you still eat Harvey and come Christmas time or whatever. They were very realistic people. They were very grounded people. And it kind of hurt me to see this stuff going on, like, you know, the way they were being attacked and the lies that were being used. You know, here in the north, we have always had trapping seasons, right? Like Kite starts 1st of October, ends the end of February. Further north, it ends the end of March. But and the reason being is because that allowed that time for them to have their pups and for the pups to be raised. And yet, what do you see? You see PETA with a supposed coyote caught in a trap, saying, "There she is, just trying to get back to her den full of puppies because they're starving to death without her." Yeah, it's an outright lie. Yeah, you know, and that was the part that, if my wife were here, I would say I kind of maybe sort of was looking for a fight, and she'd roll her eyes loud enough for you to hear.
Yeah, we should acknowledge your wife too, because she's a big part of the show and the podcast and everything that you do. I don't want to leave her out of this.
She absolutely is. She's my humor. I'm a lot funnier when she's around.
Yeah, so for folks that haven't listened to the Scuttlebutt podcast, check that out. There's a lot of episodes with Rich and Sandy, just kind of sitting down, chatting, just talking trapping, talking about the lifestyle on the trap line. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, we prefer to call it a life, not a lifestyle. But she hasn't been on the last little while, and it's mostly because she decided that, you know, I'm not going to say how old she is, but I'm 61, so she decided to change careers. She had been a VP in the major bank in Canada, and our 5 major banks are national. They're all right across Canada, but she'd been a VP in that. And she was managing like $1.4 billion, if you can imagine that, up in northern Alberta. But she had most of northern Alberta and some in northern BC and all that. And then she decided she'd had enough, because it was basically all the people she had under her. It was a continual struggle to be, you know, finding people and hiring people and all that. So she quit that, and she's now become a wealth manager. And so she's done about 4 years worth of university in the last 11 months.
Wow.
So she hasn't been a happy, sunny person to talk to. Oh, I'm getting her out to the trap line this weekend. Oh, yeah. But yes, she was my first successful conversion. And I know in today's world where conversion therapy is a bad word and all that, this is a different kind of conversion.
Conversion to a trapper.
Yeah, well, she never hunted, fished, or did anything.
Oh, no kidding.
When we met. No, and we'll be celebrating our 41st anniversary here in a couple months. And it was just, you know, but she was open to it, and I didn't push anything at her, but if she was, you know, she quickly realized that if she was going to be really involved in my life, that she was going to come along, and it just worked for her. You know, we started out, I told the story the other day about how her very first Christmas present together, I gave her this really sweet 270 Winchester with a scope on it and all that kind of stuff. I wanted a really sweet 270, you know? Yeah. She turned it about on me, became an excellent shot, and now we've hunted the world. We've hunted the world together, and yeah, she's a big part of my life. The interesting thing, whether it's hunting or fishing or trapping, is that if Dad does it, maybe the kids do, but if Mom does it, the whole family does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I got to tell you guys, we're really unimportant in the history of man, but The ladies are the important ones.
So you took a big leap in starting the show.
Yes, yes, and our biggest success was Argo had been a long time sponsor of the hunting show, and which is naturally their demographic. And I convinced them to come with me, and it has worked astronomically. We are their top promoter. We are like they can point to so many sales and references and that kind of stuff. And we have some Argo stuff reviews and that I've done on YouTube, and that they're all-time record stuff. And
yeah,
but it's just the whole thing of it is people say what a great gig you've got, and I say to them, you don't understand. I'm just living my life. I'm not pretending. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just living my life. So yeah, it is a damn good gig, And things like the Argo, the stuff that works, we can promote all day long. I've had a lot of offers from stuff that was marginal, whether it was in quality or in usefulness, and I just can't do that because I don't have time.
Yeah,
I don't have time to promote something or to even get video with or whatever. I had a clothing company, and they make what they call a rugged wear clothing, and that is for southern U.S. And I said, you don't understand. This happens every day, all day long. Like I leave, by the time I get the big line open with for lynx and otter and all that kind of stuff. Well, now I'll do 100 miles in a day on a snowmobile. And you need clothing that keeps you warm and dry, and dry is really important because as soon as you get wet, whether it's through sweating or if it's snowing and you get wet from the seat or whatever, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You're in trouble. So it was a lucrative deal that they offered, but they said, well, you could just wear it around the cabin, or you could pretend to be taking stuff out. And I says, you know what? I says, you're interested in me and my company because we don't pretend, because we put real in reality TV. We don't catch $400 beaver or anything else. We tell the truth. And I said, now because I have credibility and relatability with the folks that watch us, and you want me then to besmirch that by pretending, I don't do that.
No, it's not good for you, and it's not good for them.
And it's kind of a slippery slope. Like, I mean, I like to get up every morning and look at myself when I shave. That kind of stuff bothers me because I see that, the years in TV, I've seen just about every atrocity and fake setup, and there is so much that is reenacted on hunting shows and that kind of stuff. And that's the beauty about trapping. It's real. You're right there all the time, right over the shoulder. There's no reenacting. If we don't get it right, we don't get it right. It is a hectic pace that you keep up. We're on the trap line every 4 days, and it's about 3 hours from our house to the door of our cabin. And so we're there every 4 days. It takes me 3 days to run my line, more if I have to refresh wolf baits and that kind of stuff, because then you got to go get the bait and all that kind of stuff, and that basically that's traveling around and finding roadkill and getting approved by the government to pick it up and take it. And there's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of work involved in trapping, and probably I wouldn't be quite so universal. Like, I wouldn't tackle every fur bearer that I've got because some of them just fiscally aren't worth tackling.
Right. But for the show, it's nice to be able to show people those different species. Exactly.
To show the different species and to, you learn neat stuff. Like, I'm learning stuff all the time. We have an episode that's running this year, and it started in Canada on the 1st of April, and we will be on Pursuit this year. Will be Q4 of 2020 and Q1 of 2021 on Pursuit Channel. So watch for us. We'll be on 3 times a week. But one of the shows is on beaver, and I get to show a house that I actually trapped 2 seasons before, and then something happened. Usually with beaver, what happens is they run out of accessible food,
and they leave.
so that's the reason why they build a dam, is to flood water so they can swim up to the food, and after a while they run out of food they can swim up to, and so then they'll abandon it, and everybody thinks that they died or whatever. No, they've just moved down creek or wherever is all they've done. A lot of when they're in the pothole lakes and that, there'll be 2 or 3 beaver houses on the lake, but only one of them will be active.
Yes.
And that'll be the one where they can get food closest to, and then after being there for a year or 2, they'll move over to one of the other ones. You know, the willows grow pretty fast, and willows is one of their big foods around here. And so anyway, there was this big house that I had taken. I think I took 9. Ended up taking 9 beaver out of, or something like that, and I had 3 different sets on it, and the one set produced every time. The other one produced maybe 3/4 of the time. The others produced 1/3 of the time. And I got to look at all of these openings. Well, I thought I had that beaver house covered. You know, had 3 sets going on all the time. And I was targeting right into the lodge. Like I was using tall stands and setting the body grips right against the entrance of the lodge. I don't know if you've ever seen, but I use this flexible pipe to find the entrance to the lodge.
Okay.
And so you get to set right tight up against the lodge. They can't get in or out without hitting you, unless the hole is a lot bigger than you know your trap. And that's what I discovered. This beaver house actually has 6 entries. and on the one side, the side that was hitting all the time, was I'd actually hit the center entrance in a space of 20 feet, you know, like in a half arc circumference around this beaver house. There were 3 of these entrances, and I'd hit the center one, and it wasn't even the biggest one. You know, the biggest one was the one further to the left as you're facing the beaver house. So it was fascinating to look at all this, and I learned some interesting things. Not very often do you get to see them right after the water leaves like that. Yeah. And especially a very highly active house like that. And one of the things that struck me instantly as so interesting was the fact that there is no mud in between those sticks underwater.
Yeah.
And what is going on is their own current that they create as they swim in and out washes the mud out from in between. Have you ever sat on a beaver house and you're using a stand and you push down and it's springy, right? Yeah. It's springy. Well, what happens is you're actually too close to the house. You need to step out a little bit, and then you'll go down past that. That is the lacing of willows and that they built the house out of. That was covered with mud until the water came up, and now it's washed open, and it's like a sunshade or an awning or whatever over top of their opening. And I got to see all of this, you know, like firsthand. Like the water had just gone, not even weeds had grown up or anything, right? So the water had just gone, and it was so interesting to see. It only makes sense once you look at it. You know, the light comes on. It's like, you know, some of these experts that I talk to about, you know, about different stuff, and one of them, the one wolf guy, you know, as soon as he says it, it's like instantly, yes, I understand it. But I would have never got there on my own. I just don't have that communication with the animal that he had. And it was the same thing with this beaver thing. When I looked at it, it was instantly, yes, I understood why I was having trouble. Cause, you know, you'd go down your hole with the pipe and you could find the hole. Yeah. And yet when you try to shove the stand down, the stand is now 12 inches wide or 10 inches wide or whatever, and it would be hitting this springy stuff, right? And you'd move it a little bit left. It wasn't just one. There was a bunch of them, and I couldn't understand what was going on. Well, now I understand. It's so visible, and it's fascinating. You're always learning.
Yes.
I think if you ever wanted to become the best hunter out there, you should become a really good trapper first. You understand animals so much better, because whether you're hunting or fishing, bow hunting, fly fishing, whatever, you have the advantage of distance. You know, you have, whether it's 30 yards or 300 yards, you have that advantage of distance. You don't have to get so close. But for trapping, I have to have that coyote or wolf or lynx put their foot on that 2-inch circle where I want it, or I have to have them, convince them to shove their head through that snare, you know, or up to a body grip, you know, that kind of stuff. You have to have a conversation with the animal. And it's something that I'm understanding that I don't do well is explain that kind of stuff, because as I have more people come with me, they say, "What are you doing there?"
You don't even think about it a lot of times. Yeah.
Exactly. if you ever watch any of my, especially the Fisher Martin stuff, because we're always dealing with body grapes, and they're either 120 or 160 Belials, and I put them out in boxes, and there's reasons that they go in boxes. It's for speed. It's for I won't catch birds, that kind of stuff, right? Like birds are a big deal around here. So anyway, of course you got those two springs, and they have safeties on them, right? And a lot of people make a big deal about taking those springs off before they put it up in the box, and I can just pinch the body grip right in there by using the springs against the sides of the plywood box, right? Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many emails I get every time a Fisher or a Martin show airs and says, "Oh, I see you forgot to take the safeties off on that." Ha ha ha. My hands do it without me even thinking about it, and I don't even realize I've done it anymore. Yeah. That's the kind of thing I need somebody around whose eyes can look at it differently than me and show me what it is that I'm doing that is unique, because I just don't see it anymore. I mean, it's something we've always done, right?
Yeah, that's what instructors are good at. Some of the best instructors can think through the eyes of a person that hasn't done it before.
Yeah. And for us, so much of it is muscle memory, because you're doing, you have a huge, I mean, any given day, I'll check 150 Martin and Fisher traps, and so if it's bait day, or that's once a month, up here, our meat will actually freeze dry.
Yep.
And that it's froze dry when the pygmy shrews move into your box, because they will eat it then, because it's like a wood to them or something, right? And it is cool. You'd appreciate this as a biologist, but they can take a muskrat carcass and turn it into something you could put in the Smithsonian. They will clean it that good. Because you don't eat any of the bone, not even the fine ribs not even those fine rib bones, but they eat all the meat.
Huh.
And so at that point, once it's freeze dried like that, it's lost a lot of its scent, and it's lost a lot of attraction. Plus, they maybe ate most of it. So you go once a month, and that's over 3 months. You've got to go out, and you've got to, every one of those boxes, you have to drop the trap out of. You have to pull the screen out. You have to get the meat out and put fresh meat in. Every 2 weeks, you put fresh lure up in it. So, on and off that the machine, whether it's the Argo or the snowmobile or whatever, you make a lot of miles in a day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work involved in so many of the trails that I have. I like to keep my sets right next to. We have what, I don't know if you have them in Maine or not. They're called seismic lines. What it is from oil exploration. So
no, we don't have that.
They were okay. Well, it used to be they were a grid, and they were straight. They were probably 3-4 meters wide, and they would just knock down all the trees and everything, and they would go through and they would lay down a 3D seismic charge, and they get a read back on what formations were below, all that kind of stuff, right? So we have all these seismic trails through the bush, and I like to have my sets as close as I can to the edge, so that you can just about stand on in your machine and do it. But there's an advantage to taking a few steps off, because even if I park the machine on the far side of the trail, have to walk across the trail over, through that snow, I create this trail. Mm-hmm. And lynx follow my trails, and especially because they can smell the beaver meat or the lure or whatever's going on, over on that set, and he'll walk in and he'll walk right in my trail. Lynx cats are lazy, so they will follow whatever is packed, and so most of those trails all have blind snares on it for length. So you got to move the blind snare out of your way, and then on the way back out you got to reset it. And it's a really busy thing, and it seems like no big deal. Oh, you spear a little bit of lure on it, where you go. Well, a little bit longer than that. Yeah. So every 4 days you're out there to do that, and it takes you 3 days to cover everything. And then you on the night of the third night you head back home, and then 4 days later you start it all over again.
So you've done a lot covering like your trap line, but you've also gone and visited other trappers throughout Canada, right? Was that
absolutely fascinating?
Yeah, I'm wondering was that the initial plan, or were those people you knew, you happened to know, or did you kind of work your way into that?
I'll tell you this up front. It's been less successful than it appears on the show.
Okay.
I traveled up in there's a giggle. It's a joke, but in the territories and the Yukon and that every town is Fort something, right? Every wide spot in the road is Fort something. And I think 3 winters ago, I was in every fort in both the Northwest Territories and the western part of the Northwest Territories and in the Yukon. And I brought back one show.
Oh, really?
So many people only remember their best days. It's like talking to people fishing, right?
Yeah.
You understand this? Yeah. How many fish did you catch? Oh, it was only this way.
It's never what it used to be, too.
No, and you know, as a fish biologist, you've done creel surveys and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They're quite different than the stories that you hear, right?
Exactly.
Natural. Yeah. So those anecdotal evidence is you take it with a very large lump of salt, but so I don't know a lot of these people. You know, I've met them either through the show or somebody else has contacted me, and we've got more and more leery about it. And it costs a lot to do this, right?
Absolutely. Like, I'm amazed that you're able to do so much traveling.
Well, but we're self-funded, and some of it's worth doing. Like, I really like to see the old folks. Although a lot of the old people are getting too old. You know, they don't do too much anymore. But I've done a lot of traveling, and I'd like to travel more. But you know, my range in a vehicle is, you know, Alberta, Saskatchewan, some of BC, that kind of stuff. When I drove like to Nunavut, I did a show up there. I drove all the way to Aklavik, which you go from Nunavut. It's 2.5 hours on the ice roads on the Mackenzie River Delta, which is a whole another circus. But just to get to Nunavut, that's 3,000 kilometers, 2,936 kilometers from my door to Nunavut, to the hotel I stayed one night in Nunavut. You know, like, that is a long time. And then I got up there, and you know, we got caught, and a big storm blew in, and I spent 3 days renting a place to sleep on the floor of the church in Fort McPherson, because there are no hotels there, but the Dempster Highway was closed. You know, and the wind was blowing, and like when the wind blows there, when they have, I don't know, you guys probably don't get Chinooks there, but in the wintertime we get Chinook. Yeah, we get Chinook, and it's a warm wind. And it's got to do with the airflow coming over the mountains and how it compresses and drags down warm weather and all anyway, but usually a big thaw comes with it. Well, so when we have a Chinook here, it'll get above freezing and start thawing. Up there, when it gets to would be like 0 Fahrenheit or you know, minus 20 Celsius is when they're getting their Chinooks, and that starts blowing. And thank God they have very little snow up there. You know, they just don't have a lot of snow over there. It's almost like a desert.
It's dry, yeah.
Yeah, in the wintertime, because it blows in that road like nonstop. So I sat at Fort McPherson, you know, for 3 days, and literally, you know, it cost $25 to rent a place to unroll my sleeping bag every night in the local church, and I mean, God bless them. It was that, or try and sleep in my vehicle, and you know, in that weather, right?
Did you get a show out of it?
But I did. But you know, I drove all the way up there, and he had checked his traps the night before. You know, so we ended up getting one lynx.
Yeah.
You know, and he didn't have a lot of traps out. Yeah. You know, it's there, and the town of Aklavik is I forget how many hours it is in the wintertime by boat. Or in the summertime by boat, it's 14 hours or something by boat to get there. You can get it 2.5, 3 hours on the ice roads in the wintertime. And it's a town of 600, and he was the only trapper in the town.
Yep.
And I said to him, I said, why do you live here? And he said, it's because it's our land. This is where we live. But I said, you're the only one that lives off the land. Everybody else is down there buying a bottle of pop at $12 a bottle. You know, like, well, I don't understand.
It was the same way when I was in Alaska. It was amazing how many people in the villages don't trap.
Yeah,
almost nobody
yeah.
traps.
Well, and that was the weird part because I'm up there traveling around, and I had several different organizations, like indigenous organizations, come to me and say, "We want to hire you to teach trapping to our people again." And I said, "I don't understand. I'm an old white guy. What do I have to teach?" And they said, "Well, we have lost, several generations, and nobody has the knowledge anymore." And they claim that they lost it through the residential schools, which were a crime against humanity. Committed by the
Took them out of the bush and into town. Is that what you mean by that?
into Catholic schools. The Catholic Church bears the biggest burden on this, as far as I'm concerned. And yet they all attack the Canadian government. But yeah, they went on for a long time. It's horrific, and it's a terrible thing. I think though that it's kind of a combination of things that created a perfect storm.
Yeah.
I think not only was there the residential schools, but I think there was progress. The encroaching of civilization, and they ran into all of the sins and pleasures or whatever of modern civilization. Yeah, that they weren't exposed to before.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things that goes on is they all talk about how they want to live their life. Well, back then, their life, you know what their job was? Survival. That's what they did every day of every year, was survival. And so they had a beaver camp here in the spring, and then in the summertime was a fish camp, and then there was moose camp, and then there was trapping camp, and they just kept moving and moving and moving. But every day was a foot race to stay alive. And they have all those rights still today. They can still do all of that stuff, but they prefer, and like many of them have said this to me. Well, no, we like to be in, have a heated house and running water and 300 cable TV channels, right?
Yeah, they think you're crazy for going out in the bush.
Well, I have taught a lot of people about trapping, but the first thing, there's two things. One, that's a lot of work, and two, boy, sometimes it doesn't pay very well. No, sometimes it doesn't. Every now and then, you have the 2012, 2013, 2014 for the martin, where they're running hundreds of dollars each. Like I had, in the $200 for a martin, which, God bless them, martin are like skinning a squirrel and fleshing a squirrel, only easier because they're a little bigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is nothing so simple as a martin, and to get $200 for it, I mean, if you're getting $50, $60 for a martin today, it's still good money because there's not a lot of work involved, right?
Yeah.
As compared to getting $50 for a double XL beaver, like, wow, that's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And we, of course, out here, the Western beaver is a reddish brown, so it's not as valuable as your black beaver back there.
Yeah.
And that's funny because actually Fur Harvesters now being the only auction is changing that, because they all get lumped into whatever size they are. They're not dividing them into Western and Eastern anymore because everything's getting dyed, right?
Okay.
Everything is getting dyed, and it makes no difference because most of it is plucking, shearing, or going to making hats.
So you're doing better on your beaver now, then?
We are, but where we're doing best is the castor.
Yeah.
Because you take Western Canadian Select is $110 a pound US.
Wow.
Yeah, and only that is a particular color. When you open the castor, they can tell whether it's from the west or from the east.
No kidding.
It's got nothing to do with. Yeah, it is a particular type of castor. Like the best you'll get out of you'll get about $90 a pound, which is still really good money.
That's what I got. Yeah, that's what I got at the last auction.
Yeah, and that'll be for your best caster, your top caster in that. But we got sorry about that. There's 2 grades above that out here.
Huh.
Yeah, it's interesting. But same thing. I mean, I do all my beaver in the wintertime because for one thing, it's if I'm going to do them, I need to save so much for bait, and that's one of the focuses. Like I probably use 10 of those 40-pound 2-year-olds for bait every year. And I also, I want, if I'm going to kill them for bait, I want it to be worth something. So I take and that's when you get your most casters are in the wintertime because they're not using them. And the second thing, that's when that hide is the fullest and that. And they grade them when it comes to like the felters are the big people that are buying right now, and they grade them by weight. How much they're weighing per hide. So of course the winter beaver brings you a lot more because it's a lot thicker, a lot heavier, right?
Do you have a long-haired beaver there that's shearable?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That is our two markets: felting and shearing.
Yeah. And
the shearers are in the wintertime. I did an episode where we took 20 of our beavers. We had them tanned and plucked and sheared, and then we had them made into a blanket.
Awesome.
Well, it is like crushed velvet, but half-inch thick, and this is this king-size bed. Oh, we have a lot of fun with it. We actually opened one show this year with us laying in bed under this blanket. We're fully clothed and everything, but my wife said, "This is kind of weird, I said, "You've been married to me for 40 years and you're just figuring this out now?"
No, going back to the show, the thing has been incredibly successful. Like, I think, were you as surprised? I'm kind of surprised that a trapping show became so. Were you like the #1 outdoor show in Canada?
Oh, by multiples. We are. If you took the channel average, we're Nelson rated on Wild TV. If you took the channel average, our show has 10 times the numbers of the channel average. Okay.
Wow.
And of the next show closest to us, we are more popular by 3 times. And those are huge numbers. We did 3.24 million viewers last year.
That is incredible.
In Canada, that is like being on the major mainstream.
Most major
network.
Cable TV networks can't get that.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously it struck a chord with people that are not in the trapping community.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because that was the next words out of my mouth. Is that I bet you 80 to 85% of our viewers are not trappers.
Yeah,
I'm sure we have 100% of the trappers out there that have connection to TV or to internet or whatever. But I'm sure that I know. I mean, I could send you emails that I get one after another. I'm not a trapper, but this is so interesting. People love the back to the primitive survival, living in the woods. I mean, we don't pull any punches. We run a generator. We're not.
Yeah, you're not pretending like this is something.
No. Because once again, just doing it for the full pull. From the 1st of October till we have beaver and otter and muskrat run to May 15th, but they're damaging one another too bad in the breeding season before that. So on average, probably the end of April is when it all ends. You do that for the full pull, that's a lot of work. I mean, good God, it's good that you don't have to try to do anything by candlelight. You know what I mean? We interviewed an old guy. This is something. This came such a shock to me. Okay, we interviewed an old fella, and he went to the bush at 14. He went to left home, abusive family relationship, all that kind of stuff. And at 14, he's now, I think he's probably close to 80. So that's a long time ago. And he went to the bush, and he lived in a lean-to and went trapping. Okay, a lean-to.
Wow.
This is in northern Alberta. And I figure I'm tougher than the average bear, but I ain't that tough.
No.
Okay? And he's a kid. He's 14. Okay? And he's in a lean-to. So, Sandy's and I are doing the interview with him. And I said, so what's the toughest part about living in a lean-to? And I'm thinking about, staying warm.
Yeah.
He says, getting your fur to dry evenly. was it? Yeah. Honest to God. So he did that for his first winter, and he then drug all of his fur out to the road, and I forget how many miles he was back in the bush. Like, it took days, so he was maybe 30, 40 miles back in the bush. and you come out on snowshoes, dragging everything on a travois, right?
Yeah.
And you flag down the Greyhound bus. That was back in the days when we still had Greyhound bus. And you flag down the Greyhound bus along the highway, which you could do. You could flag down a train as well. And he flagged it down, and they took him to Edmonton. And he sold his fur and all that. His check for that winter was like $1,600. He had all of the money in the world, right?
Yeah.
This is, I don't know, back in the 50s, somewhere in there, 50s maybe, somewhere there. And so then he bought a tent. He bought an Army surplus tent, and he bought a wood heater, like an old airtight wood heater. And he went back to the bush. He did that for 2-3 winters, and then his brother-in-law kind of tricked him into taking a snowmobile. His brother-in-law, his wife had married very well, or his sister had married very well, and she talked about the all the work that Alan was going through and all that. And so he kind of come up and visited with a couple snowmobiles, and he left one snowmobile there, and so then Alan started to use it. And my wife said to him, like, this is how we think, how modern people think, and this was such a surprise to me. And this is the kind of intuitive leaps that when it comes to fur and that I never come to. But my wife says to him, so your trap line could be much bigger. You could cover much more ground. Was that the biggest benefit of the snowmobile? And he looked at her and he says, no. He says, I didn't have to pack all those animals back over my back to thaw them, to skin them. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Yeah, you can imagine. You go and you've got 4 wolves sitting there. Now that's all going to come back on your back on snowshoes to be thawed before you can even skin them.
Yeah.
Like the incredible leap forward that the snowmobile was, or an ATV was just was mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that funny? You don't think of that stuff, do you, Jeremiah?
No, absolutely not. No, and I mean, even when you're beaver trapping, you can at least skin if you have to without carrying it out. But you got a big frozen animal. I mean, that had to be an incredibly limiting factor.
Well, yeah, and it was all on his back. And you think about that. My grandpa went to the his trap line was out on the Lac-Mégantic River, and he lived in Grovedale, so it was probably in the neighborhood of 75 or 80 miles. And he went out in the fall. This is like long before I was born or whatever, but he went out in the fall on snowshoes. He came out at Christmas time, and he came out in springtime. But he did it all packing on his back. He'd come out with his bundle of fur twice a year, but that far on snowshoes. It's just mind-boggling how tough these people were. He used to tell me stories, and this is the kind of impact that, how I ended up the way I am.
Yeah.
But kind of impact, the wolves would be howling, and so he'd take a moonlight night, and he would lie up on a ridge in the snow on the Lac-Mégantic River, and he'd howl at them, and he rubbed the red phosphorus off of a match on the front side of his he had a 25-35 with the old octagon barrel, such a cool rifle. Anyway, he had that, and they'd come down the river sometimes, and he'd shoot them in the moonlight. Like, it's just like, oh my God, today that gives me chills thinking about Grandpa telling me that. Grandpa was pretty sick when he was telling me that, and I was 4, for God's sake.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Hard to remember that stuff.
Oh my God, it made such an impression. Back when men were men, right?
the good
I am
old
such
days.
a wussy today.
Which would you rather have?
One what?
Would you rather be trapping back in the 30s and 40s or doing it today? That's a tough one, huh?
I think it is a tough one because everything was so new back then, but they weren't, there was nothing that was considered humane back then. Things were pretty rudimentary. Like, you should have seen the original marten trap. Have you ever researched that?
I've heard of some pretty nasty ways people used to catch marten.
The most nastiest, and I've found them on trees around here, they would chisel a hole that was 2 inches square.
I know, yeah.
Chisel it back in chisel it back in about 4 inches into the tree. They put their bait back there. Then from the bottom on an angle up, they would drive a sharpened spike
Yeah.
so that it covered about 3/4 of the opening. And the marten would shove his head back in there to try and get the meat, and he'd shove it up over top of that spike. Well, then when he tried to pull back, it would penetrate up underneath his jaw, and he would hang there till he died.
Yeah.
And that was normal. They didn't think they were being cruel.
Right.
You know, as we become more and more civilized, we set ourselves further and further apart from the animals, right? And back in the day, you know, we were closer to a wolf. Like, I mean, everybody says, "Oh, a wolf hamstrings an animal," then they cut its throat and all that. They don't. They hang off its butt until they can't run anymore. Then one grabs it by the nose until it's exhausted and then falls over. The minute that moose quits trying to fight, they start eating it.
Yeah.
And it might live for a day and a half with wolves eating on it. The wolves kill by blood loss. It's that simple, and that's blood loss from them eating. So, but to try and put our morality or ethics or whatever on an animal is stupid, and it's not realistic, and it's the basis of all of Disney and all the grief that's come with that. But as we get more and more civilized, we understand, you know, better the way to deal with this stuff. And I guess if I lived back in those times, I'd have been happy as could be.
Yeah.
You know, but knowing what I know now,
you wouldn't know any
would
different.
have
Yeah.
more. Yeah, exactly. That's where I was trying to get before when I was talking about the Ku Klux Klan and all of that. They didn't know any different, and those folks back then didn't know any different. You know. Yeah. My grandpa nearly drowned one year coming out because he had to cross the Smoky River, which is a very large river. He had to cross it on the ice, so he had to balance between how long he trapped, because it was, you know, the seasons went much longer than what he could stay out there. But he had to balance, you know, how long he could trap and still get across that river before the ice went. And one year, you know, he didn't time it right and went through the ice and just about died. He was lucky he had a big pack of fur on his back that caught on the ice. You know, you think about stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Oh, people certainly died that way. I mean, people that disappeared and were never found.
I get to have 1 or 2 unscheduled showers or baths a year thanks to otter trapping. Just about all of our otter trapping takes place in the wintertime when everything's frozen. And otter travel immense distances in the snow, and they're a really cool animal. And most people always think of them frolicking in the water and that, and I don't think that's not how I picture otter. I picture them in the snow, and it's cool how adapted they are to it. But if you ever want to go swimming, just get a hold of an otter track and start following it, because they know. I don't know whether it's by scent or by sound or whatever. They know every weak spot on the ice, and they go to the places where you think you're safe walking. Like lots of times when you're going around the edge of a pond or a creek or whatever, you walk on the cattails, right? Because you know that the cattails are attached to the bottom. You know, that's how a cattail lives, and that's safe. You're not going to fall through there. You know, so outside the cattails you might, but otter will go right into those cattails, and they'll have a hole in there, and away they go, in and out, in and out, in and out. You know, you can fall through there. One time it was a pretty damn cold day. We were probably at like minus 30 Celsius, so that's 20 some below Fahrenheit. And I was making a long run, and I had an otter set. I found an otter access hole, and you got to hit them when they're fresh, because they don't spend very long at every body of water, then they move on. You know, they're not trapped there, and you know, it's just nature's way of them moving on to not overutilize an area or whatever. So when you find one, then you have to set it right away. And our season only opens on December 1 for otters, so I mean everything's frozen at that point. I had set this. And the easiest way is you set a set 280 or 330 body grip over top of that access hole, and when they either go in or come out, you catch yourself an otter. But it's got to be right away. So I had set it the day before. I'm coming back to, the next day I got to go by there on a dog leg, and no, nothing had been there. So I walk over there, and as I'm walking over there, I think, I should adjust that just a little bit. Like I had the trigger not set quite right. It was kind of flared on me, and I was walking over to it, and right there, then I go through the ice.
Oh.
I go through the ice, and as I'm falling, and I'm falling forward, of course, it's the way you go through ice. I'm falling forward, and my face is headed to the set 330.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I roll sideways, and because I do not want to land in this thing, and I go through the ice. just like kaboom, like like a log falling, and I go through, and the trap comes with me. So now I'm in the water, I'm underwater, but I'm afraid to put my foot down.
There's a set trap right there.
So I kind of swim my way up, and it's deep. I'm not sure whether I could stand up and touch bottom or not, but it's deep, and I grab a hold of the cattails, and I pull myself out, and I pull the trap up, and now I'm soaked. I'm soaked, and I'm about 18 miles away from, as my trail goes, away from the cabin. So you can either try and build a fire, which probably I couldn't. You got to move through all that deep snow to keep wood to keep the fire going. So the best speed was my solution, and I was on a snowmobile that day, so I flew back to the cabin. But it took my wife probably 20 minutes to get me out of my climb gear and that, because it was all frozen like iron.
Yeah, I bet.
Like I couldn't. Yeah, I was frozen that solid, right? But if my snowmobile had went through it, I'd have been wet there too. It could have been a whole different story.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So you just have to be aware of that stuff, right? But yeah, otters are, it happens all the time. Usually I only end up you go through in a sudden surprise, and it touches your waist or whatever, and that's not bad. But yeah, going swimming with your tooth floating in the water is another story.
that is no good. Do you use the Argo more on the shoulder season for that reason?
Yes, and I use the Argo. Like I have 3 different loops that total that over that 300 kilometers, and I use the Argo up in the north, and it's about a 54 kilometer loop, so 30 some miles. And when we get out there, the first day we get out there, I get the generator going, and Sandy takes care of the wood, and everything's frozen. Lots of times it'll be 25 below zero inside the cabin and that kind of stuff. So everything's frozen. So her and the dog, she starts getting the fire going and warming everything up, and I'll take off at that point, and we're probably into the cabin by 8:30 at night, and I'll get back anywhere between, depending on how much fur I get, between 2 and 3 in the morning. And by that time she'll be in bed. And the first night, though, things are so cold that you actually crawl into the sleeping bag in your snowmobile suit.
Yeah, it takes forever to warm a cabin up. I don't think a lot of people don't realize how long it actually takes.
And the only thing that doesn't freeze is ketchup. Like, I'm not sure you should eat ketchup. Like everything else freezes solid. Like it's 30 below, you can still squirt ketchup out if you want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's a tough girl, man. She has such a sense of humor, because I'll come in at 3 in the morning, and by then it'll be fairly warm, and I'll wake her up and I'll say, you need to get out of some clothes and get underneath the. And but you'll see her there, and she'll have her toque on and her snowmobile suit on, and her hood up and everything, and she'll be sound asleep in bed. Not many women are that tough or have that sense of humor, let me tell you. So I'll get into bed at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll probably sleep until 8.
Yeah.
And then get up and I'll have a cup of coffee and breakfast, and then I'll be gone for that day. I'll get a snowmobile and I'll do over 100. And the last day is usually wolf baits and beaver and that kind of stuff, and that's another 100 and some there, right? So that adds up to over 300. But some of it doesn't take, like wolf baits. If you got wolves, you got lots of work. But 9 times out of 10, you drive by and there's not a track or nothing else, so you don't even get off the machine, right?
Yeah, you don't want to disturb it, right?
Yeah, so you can make really, those days you're really making good time. And it's one of those situations that I love the Argo because I'm so safe and so secure in it.
Nice
and
heated
I'm always
cab.
warm. Yes, yeah, but like 54 kilometers, 30 miles is a long trip in an Argo.
Yeah, how fast do those things go?
Well, I use my GPS, and on my GPS I can have velocity made good, so that tells me what I'm averaging, including all my stopping and everything. And it, once again, depends on how much fur I'm getting, because I got to set up camera, get the cameraman out, that kind of stuff, and so that slows things down a lot. But I average 14 kilometers an hour.
Okay.
Is what I average,
including stopping.
that includes all my time with the fur and everything else.
Yeah.
And in reverse, when you're talking about a snowmobile, I average 23 kilometers an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that much faster. You know what I'm saying? It's amazing. Because what really takes up the time is making your sets, changing stuff, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I would have thought the snowmobile would be like 3 times faster.
You know, if all you're doing, by the time I get down into like my wolves, I end at the end of February, and after that, then I'm checking otter and beaver and that. Yeah, I can go faster then, especially if we're not freezing or blowing snow and that. But the trend the last few years, this late season snow, has become just brutal for beaver trapping, because here you'll almost always start on the south facing side of a house when you're setting up, because that is the last place to freeze, because the sun, you know, that's getting sunshine at the most, and it's the first place to thaw in the spring as well, right? Mm-hmm. So you always start there. But south facing, you know, means that here where our winds are from the north or northwest or northeast all the time, that's where the biggest drifts are. Yeah. So, you know, we just had a terrible winter for it. It just, you get out there and you got 3 or 4 sets on a house, and you might have an hour worth of shoveling to do. You know, like, I mean, it gets to be a grind. That does. That gets old.
Yeah. Now, did you have I'm curious if you had the trap line before you started the show, or did they both happen about the same time?
This trap line happened at the same time.
Okay.
I've had other trap lines.
Yeah.
I've trapped all my life. We have 2 different ways you can trap in Alberta. There are the registered lines where you own a line, and there are resident lines and resident lines take place on private land. It would be much similar to your situation.
Yep.
I just have to get permission from the landowner. Mm-hmm. And in Alberta, that permission has to be in writing, and it has to identify the legal land location. And if I'm going to use lethal snares, the owner has to check off the fact that he's approving that.
Yeah.
And that's where the vast majority of coyotes come from. Coyotes and muskrats all come from private land, the vast majority, because that's
the farm country.
Life is easy for them. Yeah, the farm country, exactly. Yeah, life is easy for them. Huh. It's a tough gig up in the big bush.
So I guess what I was getting at there was you haven't been able to run the trap line without filming.
Not this one, no. No, everything has been, like I got my buddy, trapper Gordy Clausen, and he says to me, he says, I can't believe how much of your life you document. I said, well, Gordy, you see it as that, but most people think that I'm just showing what I want to show. You know, yeah. But there's a lot of just common everyday stuff, and I have to do more common everyday stuff. Like there are days when you've got half frozen beaver there, and you're chopping them up into bait net, and the world ends up looking like a charnel house, and you know, I have to show more of that stuff, because that's all part of the work. You know, we're going out this weekend to put up the winter's wood, and we burn, depending on the winter, between 4 to 6 cords of wood. Well, we actually did a lot less last year because we upgraded our heater, and that's one of the things that ended up being on shows, and that was to put a new wood heater in. And you know, we can't do that during the winter. I know people that go out, and the first thing they do is get wood every time they go out. It's like, are you kidding me?
That's crazy.
Time for that. Yeah. I have wood put up, and it's dry, and it's out of the snow and everything else. I mean, it's there. You just pack it by the armful after armful into the fire. You know, there's a lot of preparation that goes on. We have to go out to, we had one of our bridges. We have one of these crazy creeks that it has a lot of spring in it or whatever. It won't freeze. And because of erosion and beavers and all that kind of stuff, it is like you go straight down 2 feet to the water, and then it's 4 feet deep. And then not even in the width of the Argo, the length of the Argo, then you're going back up at 4 feet plus 2 feet, and you can't do it. You know, I've tried to put the Argo through it, and I'll go down and I'll bottle it down standing on the nose, and then I can back out of it, but I can't get across it unless it's frozen. So we build a bridge there all the time, and especially then if you're running across the snowmobile, you can't cross it. And that bridge is washed out. We've had just the most unbelievable last couple of years for water around here. That bridge is washed out, and I've got to so I got to go up and I've got a sawmill. I'm going to slab a bunch of trees and that and rebuild the bridge. Those kind of things. You have wind, and when you have wet years, like you had 2 wet years in a row, the wind blows over so many trees because the ground is so saturated that doesn't take much of a blow to blow them over. So, there are days when, you pack 2 gallons of mixed chainsaw gas with you and you use it all. Now, think about that. That is a lot of fuel in a chainsaw. And sometimes you get an early spring, or pardon me, not spring, but an early fall. Like you'll get a snow in September, which is just a nightmare because there's still leaves on, but that snow will be wet and they'll land on all those. Yeah,
everything's bent into your trail.
Yeah. So then you take and cut that. I did one little loop, and actually it's just like an elbow on one of my loops, but it was 11 kilometers, and I literally walked that 11 kilometers with a chainsaw, and I would walk back and move the argo up, and you do it 100 yards at a time, but I did that whole 11 kilometers. I walked it twice, with a chainsaw in my hand, right? And it's like one of those nightmares. And, I don't care for that, especially when you get into the swamp spruce and that wet snow knocks them over. Well, then that wet snow freezes, and of course the swamp spruce are so hairy, they're all frozen down. So then you got to limb that tree to get it out of your way because everything's frozen in. You can't pull it out, right?
all the beauty of the trap line. It's good that you're showing all that and not just the hero shot with the furs.
Well, that's part of what we've got into, though, is we've decided we've started up a community, and it is a subscription-based community. We're on Amazon Prime. There's 85 million subscribers that get Amazon Prime for free, and we're huge there, and we're huge on our YouTube and all that. But we're trying to find ourselves a little more freedom. Like the deplatforming on social media.
Yeah, Amazon could drop you tomorrow if they decide to.
Absolutely. Well, what they've done is they've reduced what they pay, so it's not even worth doing anymore. Even though we're top of the heap as far as the numbers that we turn. How many viewers we have every day, but they just keep dropping it because to begin with, of course, they have a great payout. And get this, to make I know some people that make $10,000 a month from Amazon, and they were getting paid 6 cents an hour of streaming.
Wow.
Okay, that was the good days. Now we're down to 2 cents an hour. Because now they have so much content there, right?
Yeah.
So you got to go somewhere else. And YouTube, the deplatforming and demonetization of YouTube is crucial because. Other than the 13 episodes I produce every year for the TV show, you get it up to YouTube, and you don't make a lot of money there.
It's just a good bonus, though.
It's a bonus, but maybe you get $1,000 a month or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but now they demonetize anything that has a child in it. So I can't tell you how bad this hurts my soul, but I can't even put up the shows that I've done with my grandchildren, trapping. And while I understand that for people who live in Seattle and take over the mayor's office or whatever as their right, think that trapping is abhorrent or whatever, this is my life. This is my history. This is
Yeah, they can choose not to watch it.
They can choose exactly. But now anything that has my grandchildren in it has been demonetized. Some of it they've even banned. And I've had arguments with them, and I say, very reasonably, but you're showing you skinning an animal. I said, well, that's reality. And they said, but we can't show that. And there are children there, like the children are exposed to. I said, but do you have children? Yes. Do you ever eat at McDonald's? Oh, of course, all the time. I said, how do you think that meat got in between the pieces of that bun? I said, just because you choose to ignore or turn a blind eye to how it was killed and processed you cannot punish me for killing and processing my own. And, you know, I've brought them around to my way of thinking, but they all fall back to their leftist propaganda, and that's not right. We should all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And so they deplatform me. You know, like, I mean, you'll put up one YouTube video and it will blow up. You know, for me, blowing up is, 50, 60,000 views overnight. And you do something the next week and you put it up and it'll get 500 in the same time.
Obviously, they're doing something to change the algorithm.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that we're doing now. I mean, even Facebook is we have very active. We have we have a Facebook page and a Facebook private group, and both are very popular. And we have both Twitter and Instagram, but they're more effort than everything, because to do anything on Instagram, you have to do it off your phone. And like, I mean, I have everything in a computer that, off of my cameras and all that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, I have an edit suite that I could have done the Pirates of the Caribbean on, and then to try and downgrade it enough to put on my phone and that. And so Instagram doesn't work so much for me. But we went to a place called locals.com, and so we have Trapping Inc. TV.
And people can find that on your website. It's trappinginc.locals.com.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, and it's $3 a month or whatever is what it costs. You get all of our stuff is going to be there. We're slowly getting everything up. Like, if you want to watch season 6, that won't be released to the U.S. until October. It's going up there right now. There's the first 10 episodes of the season are up there. Part of that is it allows me to get around my broadcast contract. Like, broadcast contracts are abhorrent things, but because it's a subscription community, I get around it.
Okay. You're able to, the broadcast contract basically restricts when and where you can air the shows?
Oh yeah. TV is the ugliest business ever. It's like music or everything else. You wonder why, somebody has been a huge success as a musician or whatever, and they're broke when they're 40, it was because everybody else makes the money, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're not careful with the contracts you sign in, that they might own the right to use your stuff in perpetuity. And when you have something like our show that's, such a huge hit, we have the channel we air on offers to buy commercials from us so that they can advertise, either competing sponsors or their own people within our show. And it would become part of a bigger package that of course they would capitalize with other airings and that, and make much more money off of our own show than we were.
Yeah.
TV is 20-some years of TV, man. TV is dirty. But anyway, you end up trying to find a place where you can be free, like the free form of a podcast, and how we can talk for however long we want. One might be 40 minutes, the next one might be 2 hours, and it's easy. And I want that kind of freedom to eventually, if I can get enough people to subscribe at the $3 a month, I will. Everything will be there. I won't be on TV anymore because I can have a 19-minute show. I can have a 40-minute show. I can do whatever I want.
Rules.
I'm not limited by what's proper to put on TV or not. And the beauty of, as soon as somebody has to pay a nickel, they're not going to pay a nickel. A hater isn't going to pay a nickel to come troll you.
True.
And I can kick them out if I want to.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I guess, because you kind of need, I don't want to say need, but it helps to have things like YouTube and Amazon Prime to get discovered.
Yes. Yep. No question. And I mean, we will still be putting stuff out there, not as much as we did, and it will be, it will be pretty dated by the time it gets there. Like, by the time stuff goes to Amazon this year, it's going to be next April. That's when the first of season 6 will be going to Amazon. Because of broadcast contracts and the fact that we're putting it up on our own community. It's just the way it's got to be. If we can break free the chains of a broadcast contract and the we can show our sponsors that we can do as good or better for them through those digital platforms. I mean, things like podcasts and that. I mean, you've had some monetary success with your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, nothing on the level of what you're doing on your show or anything, but for the amount of effort I put into it, I'm pretty happy with. I'd always like more, but I'm happy with it so far. Yeah.
Yeah, but there comes a point where you have to give up your day job and get at it, one or the other, right? So it's got to pay.
Yeah.
And we get the number one comment we get every time we put up an episode. Oh, I love the show. You guys are so great. Wonderful, wonderful, blah, 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 blah. I wish it was an hour long. That's the number one comment. I wish it was an hour long. I wish it was too, but the format doesn't allow it. So when you were talking about all the stuff that we should be showing, we started putting up some stuff that we're calling rough cuts, and we're putting it up on our community. And we did some from spring beaver shooting, and it's 40 minutes and that kind of stuff. But it shows a lot of the background.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff we could never get on TV because there's just not time for it.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting there doing an otter set, and you've got, by the time you take out commercials, by the time you do your credits opening and all that, you've got roughly 22 minutes of content, and so that breaks into 4 blocks of a little over 5 minutes each. And when you're doing any one set, think about that. Think about if you're showing how you're doing a trail set for an otter, or if you're chopping out a beaver or whatever. It's pretty tough to condense that into just 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone anything else. So I mean, this gives us the freedom. Just as podcast has given us freedom to talk and express how we want to, this is going to give me a lot more freedom. As soon as I can make it pay, we'll move away from the broadcast scene altogether.
That's great. Have you seen other people in different industries go that route and find success with it?
Absolutely. In the actually, Locals.com is owned by Dave Rubin, and he was a big podcaster, and he moved away from Patreon. I don't know if you ever heard all that story, the war that they had, because Patreon demonetized somebody that they didn't agree with on their platform, and so him and Jordan Peterson and others, they went elsewhere.
Okay.
And Jordan went on to YouTube and that kind of stuff. I know people that have been huge within the digital platform. One of them is Randy Newberg.
Yep.
I don't know if you've
On Your Own Adventures.
Yes. Well, now it's Randy Newberg Hunter, or Hunt Talk Radio is his podcast.
Okay.
And he hasn't been on TV in years, and he has had the success in Amazon, and he's had success in YouTube and everything they do. Lots and lots of stuff. But he's looking also to move to a subscription, because he's getting his monetization is getting cut down. At one time, he was running so many millions of minutes on Amazon that they set a whole new level for him to be paid at, because it was very, very popular, right? And they wanted to encourage him. Well, now they have so much content that, isn't it amazing? In a world where if you can throw a football further than somebody else, you are to be desired and paid millions and millions of dollars. But when somebody like Amazon gets the top outdoor program like that, and then when they can get 1,000 other mediocre ones, those 1,000 other mediocre ones are more important than the top one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they go for that quantity rather than quality. So yeah, he's done that. But I mean, now he's looking at, maybe he needs to start his own community as well. Something where people, can support, directly support what's going on. And when you look at how we do stuff today, whether it's Netflix or any of that kind of stuff, people are willing to pay to get what they want, and we're not talking about huge dollars, but you do need lots of people.
Yes. Yeah. They say the hardest thing is the first penny, right? If you get, the hardest part is just to get a paying customer, but once you have them, it's a lot easier to work within that and adjust what you got to charge and everything like that.
Well, we were, you know what we actually wanted to do? We wanted $20 a year from everybody. That's what we wanted.
Yeah.
That was it. But locals will only, their minimum is $3 per month. Okay, that's their minimum. That's the way they're set up, and so that's the platform that we're working within. We get things like, we know every one of our subscribers. We have their email, their contact information. We know analytics on them. You know, whether they have taken a month off or any of that kind of stuff. All that stuff that you never get from YouTube.
Yeah,
You know, you don't get
YouTube
that
doesn't give you much at all. You get
No,
stats. That's
and
about it.
So what if they deplatform you tomorrow and you have 100,000 subscribers and you can't reach them no more, and you can't in any way tell them where you've gone or what's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, I mean, so that's a big bonus right there, is to be able to communicate. And we're hoping to build this into a lot more, where, you know, maybe we have get-togethers at the NTA with, you know, with people and stuff like that, or we don't know where it's going to go. I am, you know, respectful of all of the people that take the time to watch us and they have lots of good ideas. Maybe somebody will, you know, we'll have one that really takes off for us. I know that we've had a little bit of success of as far as subscribers go, and that's pleasant. I mean, that people are, you know, willing to support you fiscally, you know, like that.
Yeah. Is there an avenue to kind of develop your own platform, incorporating advertisers that you would manage, as opposed to having, say, Google or YouTube find the companies to advertise?
I can advertise all of my sponsors within my shows on. I can leave it all in. Like when I go to Amazon, I can't leave billboards or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's got to be, there can't be an external link or anything like that. And, you know, I can leave all of that in on locals. That is something they're talking about. They're also talking about bringing out an app, and I mean, everything's very new. There are different companies. We got to the point about a year ago where people decided, all of a sudden realized that everything is owned by Alphabet Company or Facebook, you know, and they controlled everything.
Yeah.
And even though they hid behind it is a private company, my private company, and you're here as a guest, and I can control you that way, they're looking at, there's a lot of, you know, rumblings from governments about you know, monopolies and syndications, and as much as I don't like the leftist spin of big tech and all that, the last people I want controlling the government or controlling the internet is the government.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, for God's sake, you can barely buy a fishing license online, or pay your taxes online, or pay a speeding ticket online, and half the time that, you know, their websites don't work, and, you know, like, I don't want them controlling it, but we need to have some balance, and that's where these things like locals.com has come from. Is he's trying to set up something that is, you know, outside of their realm, you know, where the people who are generating the content have the control. And that's kind of nice, you know. It's been enjoyable. It's building, you know. It's only been up for a few months, but it's building, and we're excited.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I always wonder about how people who have their own shows or even like magazines, how much effort you have to spend to find advertisers and sponsors and go through all that, and how much of that actually comes to you. Did you notice like how much effort have in the past, when, you know, just working on the show, how much effort did you have to work early on to actually find sponsors?
Oh, worst job ever.
I hate it. That's why I don't do much of it, just because I can't stand doing it. Calling people up and asking, you know, it's a.
I'm more successful when I can sit down and talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of companies, you're dealing with their marketing company, you know. And the toughest part about all of this, especially when I am the executive producer and the executive janitor, you know. Like, I mean, So what I'm selling all the time is me. Worst job ever. Yeah, worst product ever sell. You think there's something why you're so wonderful. No, I'm not kidding you. Think about that.
Yeah.
You can hand me anything. You can hand me a nut and bolt. You can hand me an axe. You can hand me anything. And I can sit there and extol the virtues of that all day long. Ask me about why my show is good, and I kind of look at the floor and scuff my toe. I'm damn happy to have Nielsen ratings because I look at that and say, there, 3.24 million people. That's why we're good.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is the worst job, and I like it when I can sit down. Like a lot of our sponsors are small companies, or we started with them when they were small. Like Argo, I have been with in one form or another for just about 20 years. Actually, and I had a history with them before that. It is the toughest job is to get sponsorship, and most of it is, believe it or not, you spend a lot of your day teaching the marketing guy about marketing.
Really?
And a lot of them, well, the big companies, it's all numbers, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we first started in hunting, we were on the Outdoor Channel, and it only aired in the U.S. And so everything, and I remember dealing with the big marketing houses, because you would go to, people like Leupold or Nosler or Winchester Browning, and the ammunition companies on, they all had these big marketing companies. And the big marketing company would say, well, what's your numbers? And at that time, Outdoor Channel was just large enough to have marketing numbers. At that time, you had to have about 30 million subscribers. And the worst part about that was that when you got that small of a sample in the size of a population like the U.S., you had a plus or minus swing of 3%, of 3 points. So you may have a -3 rating, a 0 rating, or a +3 rating. A +3 is really big number, right? And so they would ask you for your numbers, and of course that would have cost you money to get from your channel that you're paying to be on. Yes, you can hear the sarcasm in my voice. You're paying them for this, and they have these, so then you'd have to pay for those numbers from them. So they'd make you jump through that, and then they'd look at it, and then they'd use that line on you. And so you'd talk about focus demographics, and you'd talk about this, that, and the next thing, and it was always really, really tough. Where I quickly figured out where it was best is where I could sit down and talk with somebody. Mm-hmm. And so if I could start with a small corporation where I was dealing with somebody who worked in the plant, or dealing with the guy who owns the company or whatever, that was far more important. And I could show, I could see the success. And whereas marketing company, once again, you might be turning big numbers. You might be turning big numbers for them, but they don't tell you that. They figure you're going to use it, as a bargaining chip. They just don't want to deal with you. They just don't want to pay you what you're worth, right? Right. And you learn some terrible lessons. The first lesson that you learn, and it takes a while to learn it, is that your first deal is your best deal, and whatever you settle for the first time, that's all you're ever going to be worth. You might bump it up 10% or whatever, but if you decide that you're going to represent them for 4 fishing rods and a handful of tackle, it's never going to get any better. Laugh. I know everybody laughs when I get to this part, but it's the truth. It's the truth. If they're not paying you money, they're not considering you an actual investment in advertising and marketing. I mean, there's a reason why pro staff then became brand ambassadors, because it was like a much more friendly thing. Pro staff was kind of this arrogant guy who was, going to tell you how things should go, but a brand ambassador is a kind of more approachable person that you walk up to and talk to and all that. But in most cases, the brand ambassador, they're just people working for a shirt and a hat. Yeah, they are. And if you settle for free stuff, that's all you ever worth. Yeah. I mean, there's a point where, when Ford advertises on NBC or ABC or whatever, they don't do it for truck decals or whatever. There's money involved, and it is no different. But now you've got a bunch of little people who are not very sophisticated. Once again, like me, they're probably more capable with a toilet brush in my hand than dealing with a marketing manager or whatever, right? One of the funniest things that has happened recently was the shift to internet. And about, again, I'm saying 4 or 5 years ago, everything was going to be internet. Everything was going to be Facebook. Everything was going to be digital. And TV was dead. TV was dead. And we dealt with a lot of these marketing managers, and these are guys that, my age, or in their 50s and that.
Yep.
And they didn't know the first thing about digital marketing. And you talk with 10 in a day, and you had 10 different outlooks on it. And I was like, God, I guess I need to learn something. So there was this kid that works for Kuiu. And you probably would never heard of them. They're very popular hunting clothing, but it's out west here.
They make backpacks?
Yes, they make backpacks, core backpacks, but their clothing is better.
Okay.
Kuiu is, they're for the elite hunter. They sponsor a lot of the marathon hunters and runners and that kind of stuff. Anyway, I sat down with this kid. Happened to be doing seminars at a sports show where he was there, and he was from California, and he's like the typical guy, or my opinion of a lot of the typical guys from California. And he's got a haircut that looks like a lawnmower went nuts, and he's got a tarp grommet in one ear and a bone in his nose and all this kind of stuff. And I never know where to look when you're talking to him. It's just like when your buddy invites you over and his 16-year-old daughter walks out and she's got less clothes on than Victoria's Secret model. Like, pretty soon you're looking at the tree above your head to try and talk to something when you're trying to talk to them, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. I don't know whether, am I supposed to stare at the bone in his nose, or I'm not supposed to? I don't know what to do. I'm too old for this stuff anymore. But anyway, I sat down to him and I said, "Tell me about this. How does this work? I can't understand." One time in my life I sold vehicles, and I knew that if I got people to walk through the door, I had a 1% chance of making a sale. If I got them to sit down and talk, now it bumped up to 5%. If we went for a test drive, all the way to 20%. Get them talking about color, other 5%. That kind of stuff, right? We had all these stages now. You knew where you're at in the game. Nobody knows where they are in digital. And he said to me, the first thing he said was, the thing about social media is to forget about the media and remember the social. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, great, Kwai Chang. That makes a lot of sense." I'm frustrated. I'm very frustrated. He says, "No, think about that." He says, "You, me, and everybody does things for their friends that they wouldn't do for pay." And I was like, "Boing!" The light went off, and I would have never made that leap on my own. And yes, it makes sense. And when you want to grow something, you want these people to identify with you, because as a friend, they will share your stuff, they will recommend you, they will do all that kind of stuff. So where we were always looking, and all these marketing managers that I'm dealing with, we're all looking at a return on investment, ROI, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at, if I put $10,000 into digital, what do I get back? Do I get back, $10,001? Do I get back $1 million? That's the kind of stuff we're looking at. It doesn't make any difference. These people need to identify with you. So even more than ever, you're selling yourself, or you're selling the legend of yourself, and that's what is so important. And as I got going into this deeper and deeper, and I started understanding, like, if you have an actual business Facebook page, there are tools in there that you can use that can allow you to compare your Facebook page to anybody's page, and it can show you things like how many people are connecting with you, and how many people are connecting with the other person, and your activity every day, and all that kind of stuff. And it is amazing how you might compare. The days of buying likes on Facebook. It's frowned upon, but there's still a term about organic or paid, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and Facebook has changed it so even if you take out ads with them, that is no longer organic. Even though you're paying for an ad, it is no longer organic. Whereas, you could pay some kid in India to turn his monkeys loose on the computer and get you 1 million likes or whatever. But then you need to see if those people are interacting with you or not. And that's what some of these analytics show you on Facebook. And so as I learned about all this, I started incorporating this into my discussions with marketing managers and all that. And here I am putting on a course for these guys.
Yeah.
Other guys that are in their 50s, and now they're starting to understand. But while I'm putting this course on, I'm showing how good I am. Or how good my universe is.
You understood how marketing worked more than they did, and
well, they would look at Jim Shockey. Jim Shockey has 600,000 likes on his Facebook page. On the average day, he has a positive growth of 0.01%. I have 15,000 or whatever. An average day, I grow 3-4%. I have that much more. My reach is so much larger than his. Even though he has 600,000 people, his reach might be 0 in a day, and my reach might be 400,000 or 500,000, depending on what we're doing. Those are the kind of numbers that you can use to level the playing field for the little guy. That is one of the benefits of digital. This has got a long way from traffic, hasn't it?
No, but it's fascinating for me on a personal level, in addition to just being generally pretty interesting.
Well, yeah, but what it is though is that you can. The thing about digital is it's digital, and we keep talking about how phony things are because we knew that people were buying Facebook likes and they're buying YouTube likes, all that kind of stuff. So, it's one of those things. We're throwing the baby out with the bathwater because not all of it is fake. Like those numbers that Facebook shows you, the reach on your page, the interactions, that kind of stuff. Those are real. They can't be fudged. And when you can show that and throw some comparisons in, compare yourself to anybody out there, all of a sudden they're like, who is this little guy that's trapping ink? But he's only got 15,000 people that like his page. That doesn't matter. Look at his reach. Yeah. I don't know why people like or don't like pages. I don't know whether they think that they're filling up their computer, or I don't know whether they think that they don't want anybody to search their history and see a trapping like in their history or something. I don't know whether it's one of those three little things. I don't know. But it's funny, when the Facebook first started, it was nothing to get huge numbers. We have over the times, one of the dirtiest things Facebook ever did was that you can't change or rename your page without losing it all. Mm-hmm. So as you change stuff, and get less awkward or get better or whatever, then you lose all of that. Yeah. One time we had pages, a page that for our hunting, and that was over 1 million, and that was all organic. Now it's a struggle to get 20,000.
Yeah.
But we have we are reaching people, and that's what's important. And that's what's important to show to these media people. And now, as I got good at that, TV's back.
Yeah, it might be temporary, but.
Well, yeah, it might be. But all of these media people had, spent so much money just blindly throwing it into, the people that had 600,000. I'm getting a call from Morley Smith, the Wolf guy. I'm going to have to call him back. They were dumping all of that money into these, buying just based on the Facebook page likes and all that kind of stuff, and they weren't getting nothing for it. So all of a sudden, everybody went away from that, right? And because nobody understood what they were buying or what they were getting, and it's amazing. But when you take you have a great digital platform like what we have between the YouTube and between Amazon Prime and Facebook and all those kind of things. Our reach, our universe is gigantic. When we throw into it, 3.24 million viewers, people that will tune in, at least once a week or whatever on TV in Canada, there's only 37 million people in Canada. That's a great number, but I can do those kind of numbers between YouTube and Amazon Prime in a month. Yeah. And then there's things on YouTube that you can use too. Like I'm telling people, I'm trying to be honest because I get asked these questions so many times, and I'm not sure whether the people ever take it, because they're all looking for one simple, easy answer. Oh, be a good trapper. Okay, we got that. So one of the things about YouTube is take a look at what your I always refer to it as your entrapment, but your capture rate. Like, how long do people stay engaged? How long is your average engagement? Average engagement is 9 minutes on my YouTube, and that is since 2015 when I put it up. I average every time somebody clicks on a video, I average 9 minutes of capture. That's great if you're one of my sponsors,
Yeah.
And this is in a world where every 3 seconds is considered a view. Okay, so if you just clicked on it for 3 seconds, that's a view. But you go back in through your engagement, and in my engagement, it's over 9 minutes. Those are the kind of things that can give you some balance, but you need to know how to use it, how to utilize it, right?
Yeah, it's not as simple as I mentioned something on a podcast and then they make X number of sales. I think I read a quote the other day, something about the goal of advertising is not to make a sale, it's to bring a potential customer to a place where they're more likely to make a sale.
Absolutely. I always describe it as it's my job to make the phone ring. After that, it's up to you.
Yeah. Like with the car dealership thing. And I feel like the trapping industry, we're such a small industry, and it seems to be more personal. People connect to this community, like any real small community that's specialized. That relationship is probably stronger than just somebody seeing an ad for Pepsi on TV or something.
Well, that's what I'm trading on, though, is my credibility.
Yep.
And when you have, if you grind it out and go through all of 6 seasons we've got now, you see the same thing being used over and over again. Believe me, if it's getting used more than once on my show, I believe in it and it's worth it. Because I don't have time for junk. I just don't have physical time for it. And that credibility, that's the connection that when your fans look at it or your viewers look at it and they say, well, he ain't got time for junk, and look where he lives, what he does, they can't make up for garbage, and that's what you're doing, is you're trading on your credibility to make that phone ring.
Yeah,
and it's very important. And you know what? This is probably where I would be more successful if I wasn't quite so passionate, but it's a big responsibility. Mm-hmm. The only good thing about getting old is that you end up with money. And I can afford to do whatever I wanted to. But, if somebody's asking me about whether a $100 trap setter is better than a $30 trap setter, and I'm using the $30 trap setter, I'm going to tell them that.
They trust you.
I'm not going to.
People's trust is worth a lot. Absolutely.
And it's, if I recommend something and it fails, that's more on me than it is on the product.
Yeah.
That's just the way I feel about it. Come from a different time and generation, right?
Yeah. So, how's the podcast been going? You've been doing that for about a year now, or has it been over a year?
Yeah, it's been struggling because we used to be able to travel a lot. We do a bunch as we traveled, and I don't know a lot of people. If you can tell me people I should talk to, I would love to. I've the closer to the general area, the better it's been. Like I've done talks with the fellows from Foundation of Wildlife Foundation Forever in Idaho. They have a bounty on, or a way of paying for wolf kills, and I've talked with Randy in Montana, and I've talked with folks all around the place, but they're all pretty near to me, right?
Yeah.
It's harder to make those connections, especially that eastern traffic connection. I've had Jeff Dunlap and Jeff Haggerty and Mark Sagerman and those kind of folks on the trapping podcast. I probably need to do it again. I had hoped to be at the NTA, which is what it would have been right about now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy how things have changed in a short period of time.
It is. Yeah. We get a lot of great feedback. I've had a couple of the biggest problem is that you never know what you're getting when you get somebody agree to come on.
Mm-hmm.
Some people can talk and talk and talk. Some people I just have to, it's like a kid's toy. You nudge it this way and off it goes. And then it runs into something and you straighten it out and nudge it that way and off it goes. Those people are wonderful because lots of times we don't just talk about trapping, we talk about everything under the sun. And that's great.
Yeah.
That's great because, I mean, trappers are just people and we have more interest than just trapping. But I've had some people where it was like yes and no answers and oh my gosh, is that tough.
Yeah, and being a good interviewer is a skill that I'm learning is more difficult than it seems. Like, you watch guys like Joe Rogan, they find ways to get things out of people and kind of keep that flow going, and it really is a skill.
Yeah, well, but there's a couple different Joe Rogans. There's the idiot that shows up and smokes dope with his comedian buddies. I don't care for that. I don't care for his interview. There's the guy who shows up and whether he interviews is politically left or right or in the media or is Elon Musk or whatever. I enjoy him.
Yeah. And
he's very intelligent. And he asks some very pertinent questions and he has some really neat viewpoints. I think he has to work harder on those ones. I think the other ones he just phones in.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You're just having fun with friends on some of it, but when the interviewer asks the question that the audience is thinking at the time, and asks it the right way and at the right time, I think that's key to making a successful podcast.
Well, and part of it though, I mean, he deals in very up to date topics, right? I mean, everything is in the news and that, so he knows what questions people want to. When people phone me up and want to do a podcast, trapping's a very different thing.
Yeah.
It's not that much in the news. I mean, I always hit on the stuff about, the lies that the antis have done and PETA and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, as far as you want to get down to the nitty gritty, we could have talked this long just about the different ways I trap muskrats. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I could do it without thinking about it. It's just that when something is very visible, that's our world today, though. That's when something is very visible. It is an easy conversation to have. It's when there's a little bit more involved in it, right? Like a little bit more. You start talking about historic things and the history of trapping, and its historic place. Like our trapping as a pure monetary commercial venture doesn't really exist anymore, and I don't know that it ever will again. But trapping as a method of conservation and control, very, very necessary. Very necessary. We can't afford not to have trappers on the landscape. We need them. We have a problem with wolves right now in Alberta. Like they say we have between 700 and 8,500 wolves, and our wolf density is hitting 11 wolves per 1,000 square kilometers. Well, ungulate population damage begins at 6.25 wolves per 1,000 square kilometers. So we're double of that, right? But we're also learning that you need to kill the entire pack, or the pack fractures and you end up with more packs. So we're learning that more and more the trapper is becoming the heat-seeking missile in this.
Yeah.
In wolf control, because he can do that. He can get the whole pack.
Yeah.
Aerial gunning doesn't, poison doesn't. But the trapper can
and the trapper do it for free.
Exactly, but what we need to do. Well, here's the problem. Wolf trapping is a lot of work, a lot of time, keeping those baits going and all that, and then you might catch half a dozen wolves or whatever, but they might all have mange. So you know what you got for the year? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nothing. So there should be a reimbursement of expenses or something, because we are needed on the landscape. We've gone through a dance. Alberta has woodland caribou, and the woodland caribou numbers in certain areas are dying off. And we haven't hunted woodland caribou in Alberta now since the 80s. That was the first thing. Oh, the numbers are dying. So hunters trappers, fishermen are the conservationists. We stepped up and said, okay, well, let's not hunt them and let them grow back. Well, that wasn't what was going on. And so then they worked their way through various things that's going on, and they decided that it was wolves, and then it was climate change. And now, as we've actually spent some money, studying them out, we netted a bunch of them in 2000 and 2001 and put collars on them, and we learned an immense amount. And we netted both the wolves and the caribou, so we could track them. We've had some stuff done by biologists that was silly. We had some WMUs that where the caribou were in trouble, and they had moose population. So they decided that if we kill all the moose off, the wolves will leave. And I said, but how does that work? Well, there won't be food there. Well, I said, well, aren't they eating the caribou now? Yeah, they are. So I said, so if you kill all the moose off, won't the wolves leave right after they eat the rest of the caribou? Well, no. I said, you're not making any sense whatsoever. But we actually did that. We went through that. And what ended up happening, they're giving out all these cow tags and calf tags and all this kind of stuff. What ended up happening was that the area was very, very hard area to hunt now. But the other WMU across the road wasn't, and there was a whole bunch of cows and calves shot across the road kind of thing. And so it was an utter failure. But all through this, we keep doing studies. Now we've discovered that it's actually got to do with development. So the development of roads and seismic lines and all that. So now roads are much more temporary. They're controlled as far as access. They're controlled. Seismic lines and that are no longer allowed to be straight. They have to be low impact, and they wander their way through the woods and all that kind of stuff. But that stops the human encroachment and the pressure on the caribou, because caribou are literally the canary, the dumb canary in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing other than a rainbow trout. There was nothing more born to die than a caribou. Like, I'm not kidding you. And so now we don't have human pressure on them. But then we discovered that things like logging is really hard on caribou, because the old growth forest gets taken down, and the lichen that they live on isn't so available. Okay. So then we also discovered, through this finally interweaving the caribou and the wolf studies together, we discovered that, look at the pattern of where the caribou travel in that. The caribou were avoiding cut lines, and they were avoiding roads because the wolves traveled them. And that revelation was unbelievable. So it wasn't just one thing that was causing a problem. It wasn't climate change, and it wasn't just forestry, and it wasn't just the roads and all that, and it wasn't just the wolves, but it was the combination of all of them. The wolves use the roads and the grids and the grid system and that of seismic and all that to travel on and to hunt on, and they're very efficient at it. But now all of a sudden, the caribou over time were avoiding these areas. They wouldn't come within 300 yards of a road, that kind of stuff. It's a fascinating thing to learn about, but what we've learned is really how little we know, and that it could be just a matter of this is one of the evolutions that we lose species occasionally. We're not in the middle of any sixth extinction like they say. We actually got more fauna on the face of the earth now than more mass than we've had throughout history. But it's amazing, as we get more information, that we discovered how badly we've handled it and what the actual solution is. I don't think anybody's ready to address the actual solution, because that would mean, if you're going to save that handful of caribou, you're going to have to take all logging, all oil and gas, all tourism, everything has to come out of those areas in order to try and protect that. And we're down to, in some cases, a handful of caribou that are left in some of these herds. We're 63, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they're not reproducing, because black bear, grizzly bear, they all kill a lot of calves every spring. Wolves kill a lot. We did both poisoning for caribou and for wolves. And get this, the one guy one year did over 60 different ungulate kills. So he killed elk, moose, and deer in order to set up poison sites to kill his wolves. And all we've done, that and aerial gunning out of helicopters, all we've done is we've held the line. we still have 63 caribou in that herd. We haven't gained and we haven't lost. But then you have a situation like where there was the Coppermine Mountain. There was 18 in that herd. Well, there was an avalanche, 14 of them died. You know, like, I mean, those kind of things happen. So
Yeah.
we still, you know, the Porcupine Hills herd still numbers in the thousands. You know, but it's not being affected. It's not being affected like the caribou are on the eastern slopes, where there's a lot more development. There's oil and gas, and there's logging and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. It's a balance that we have to find. Some things you can say, some things you can't.
Yep. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Well, Rich.
Oh yeah.
you gotta call the Wolfman, and I gotta call my boss. So. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun talking with you, and I'm sure we could talk all day on this stuff.
Oh, I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on. If I could give myself a little bit of a boot, they can connect to anything about us by going to our website, and it's just www.trappinginc.com, and you can hit all our Facebook, Amazon Prime, locals, all that stuff from there. Awesome. I sure appreciate your time and what you're doing for the trapping community, and I'd like to get together, do this again sometime, maybe in person, huh?
That would be fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sounds great. You take care.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.